What red flags should people look out for when they go out to eat at restaurants? The first thing they told us in culinary school when you're learning the basic rules for food safety standards is if you enter a seafood restaurant and you smell fish, you should leave. I always say if you enter a seafood shop or restaurant, it should smell like the ocean, mostly like fresh air and salt water. That means everything is fresh. If it smells like fish, it starts to become bad, and if it starts, it's gonna be bad very fast. A $4 steak is not a good steak. There was a restaurant on my school campus that would have a $3 steak night every Monday during happy hour. You wouldn't be allowed to choose the rarity of your steak, and they were usually pretty small pieces, but also came with a side of fries. Sometimes you got lucky and got a medium rare piece of decent steak. Most of the times it was pretty dry though. It was fun because you could get a pint of beer for $3, so my friends and I would go fairly often just to shoot the crap and have crappy steak. If employees try to argue with you about food quality in order to dissuade you from sending something undercooked back, just leave. It means they have a cook who can't take criticism, and your chances at getting a sneezer are greatly increased. Back when my husband and I were dating, we went to a Thai restaurant. We ordered broccoli and noodles, and when the dish arrived, we saw there were loads of black specks all over. Looked closer, and they were aphids. Grossed out, we called the waiter over. He took a look and tried to argue with us that it was black pepper, not aphids. Dude, there were obvious legs and wings. He wouldn't budge, so we walked out and never went back. I kinda thought that was gonna go in the direction of, "Oh, I'm very sorry, sir. I'll be right back with the bug spray." You should ask where your oysters come from. If they don't know, you don't want them. It works for most seafood as well. This literally happened to me and my wife. We asked a waitress where the oysters we had were from, because they were absolutely massive, and she said she didn't know and went back to ask the kitchen staff. It was pretty empty because it was closing time, and we could hear whoever answered her say, "They come from the ocean," pretty loudly. I couldn't stop laughing. I was crying by the time she got back out. Dirty, stained carpets. I have no idea why anyone would open a restaurant and put carpet down. Carpets are a nightmare to clean, and they always look dirty after a year of being laid. Mostly it's for sound reasons. Loud restaurants are becoming a major problem, so much so a New York food critic has started including decibel readings in his reviews. There's even an app to report loud restaurants. After my mom had her brain tumor removed, she was really sensitive to loud noises. One of her favorite restaurants renovated from carpet to floor tiles, and we had to stop going because of the increase in volume being too much for her. I had not considered this aspect. With the anti-carpet rhetoric that's so prevalent in most places today, we seem to have forgotten one of the key reasons people like to put them in the first place. Still, those things are monsters to clean. I hated our one-carpeted room in my first cafe job. Look, I appreciate everyone's advice, but I've got to say, you have to defy some of this sense to eat good street food. I was consulting for an American firm in their Mexico City office. After a few weeks, the guys I was working with were like, "Do you want some real good food?" We pulled over to a row of pop-up tents off the highway, and I had some of the best tacos of my life. I feel like most of the tips in this thread are for restaurants. Street food is a totally different animal. The best food in Malaysia always comes from small hawker stands like this. It might not be sanitary, but damn if it isn't good. If a restaurant has a huge menu, it's all frozen. Pastry chef here. As much as people say you should avoid the specials, I can't speak for everyone, but at least in desserts or breakfast pastries, if you see something new, it is worth trying. Chances are it's something the chef has been working on for weeks on their own time, and there's probably a lot of love and effort put into it. Also, stand by if the menu is a book, it's probably not great. The biggest thing to keep an eye on though, in my opinion, is the staff. If there's angry people, get out as fast as you can, obviously. If everyone's kind of apathetic and not talking to each other much, get out. That's also a crappy environment. Everyone's probably really passive-aggressive, and that is going to show in the food. If people seem genuinely good with being there, even if it's busy or if there's a playful ragging going on, that's where you want to be. The better the staff gets along, the better everything in the place runs. Pictures of food on the menu that clearly aren't from the restaurant. I designed a menu for a restaurant and left spaces for the pictures. They said they wouldn't send any and told me to take pictures from Google. I have never eaten there. I'd like to add I had no idea what some of those dishes were. My favorite was, quote, house special, unquote, but they didn't know what that would be. I was told to just add something nice. If the area is very busy but the restaurant is empty, that's usually a bad sign. I've worked in food a lot. Carpet. Yes, it's quieter and doesn't get slick, but it's one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen. I saw them pull up a carpet when they remodeled and put in more carpet, and let me tell you, vacuuming only goes so far in a restaurant, and I know they never, ever shampooed it. Yeah, I clean carpet for a living, and yeah, restaurants are disgusting. The stuff we pull out is usually black slime because of the grease and grit. Most of the people we clean for try their best to get clean regularly, but even then I find it hard to eat at those places. When the menus are super dirty and never cleaned, that means everything is super dirty and never cleaned. Waffle House. Cook for a small Mexican restaurant here. I always look for how the staff interact with each other. If they all seem to enjoy being there and coordinate well, more often than not it's because everything is running smoothly and they have a good system, which usually means they know what they're doing and you can expect good food. That's how it always is for the smaller family-run restaurants I frequent anyway, which I always believe have the best food. I used to work at a locally popular deli. No chefs or anything. However, the whole staff ended up really clicking and integrating into our larger friend circles. That place won Best of awards every year because I think our friendships and looking forward to going to work translated into pride and craftsmanship, or whatever you call fancy sandwich making. I visited again years later for nostalgia purposes, and the food was mediocre at best. Their reputation had suffered as we graduated college and moved on with our lives. There's definitely something in the spirits of the staff that correlates to the quality of the food, whether or not it's professional quality or not. I have a family member who's worked in multiple different restaurants, and they always advise me never to get drinks with ice, because too many places don't keep their ice machines cleaned because it's so often overlooked compared to other kitchen equipment. Ran a kitchen and can confirm. When I started, they only cleaned the ice machine and soda machine when black stuff was in the Mountain Dew. While I was there, it was bi-weekly for the ice machine and nightly for the soda machine. I work front of house. When my boss, the owner, used to host and people would complain to her about the hour wait on Saturday night at 7 p.m. and threaten to leave, she'd tell them, if the restaurant you choose doesn't have a wait on a Saturday night, you might not want to eat there. And then she'd turn her biggest crap-eating grin on them. Can I add you to the list? If you order a meal that should take a long time to cook and it comes out very quickly, it's been pre-cooked. This applies mostly to quiet nights. If it's quiet and it comes out immediately, it's just been sitting there. But if it's busy, then there's enough turnover that it's likely all right and chefs are just being prepared. We have a sushi place where the chef gives you free samples of future dishes. This usually means they take pride in their work and they want to see people's reactions before committing to the menu. If there's different cuisines on the same menu, it usually means it's not going to be good. I don't trust people that can do Japanese and Italian in the same kitchen. There's a Chinese restaurant in my town with a sign out front that says, "Clean food and fresh." I still can't help but wonder why they'd bring that up unprovoked. I suppose it reads better to some people than dirty salmonella-inducing slop served daily. But jokes aside, a following comment provided some great insight into how people in China discuss the quality of their food at restaurants. In China, it's very common for a customer to ask about the freshness of the food, and the boss is usually happy to accommodate and answer truthfully. Just recently, my mother went out and asked the boss how fresh the shrimp was, and he admitted it wasn't too fresh and was actually frozen, recommended the fish instead. All of it's totally normal and no one was offended. I've worked in restaurants for over a decade. A couple of years in the kitchen and the rest as front of house. If your server's response to, "How is the item?" seems disingenuous, that's a big red flag. We know what goes on in the kitchen, we know the complaints, and we know which items to stress over when we deliver them. Servers who pause or seem uncomfortable with that question generally equate to a menu full of stuff we wouldn't eat even as a free shift meal. A good sign is when the servers hang out and eat at the restaurant post-shift. Generally, we're getting a discount, but not free food. If we're spending our nightly tips on it, then it's worth it. I clean kitchen exhaust systems. If I walk into a restaurant and I can smell grease, I walk out. That means the place isn't clean. From the exhaust system to the cooking equipment. We clean some places where grease drips off the hoods onto the cooking surfaces. Cook at a casual fine dining restaurant here. If your food is out impossibly fast, it's probably something to be concerned about. I'm talking ordering an entree and it's out in like 15 minutes. This usually means it's already been cooked and they just have to reheat it. Now, something like a salad, okay, that shouldn't take any time at all. But you want to make sure your lettuce or whatever green it is still crunchy and fresh. Otherwise, it's been made before and it's been sitting. Generally speaking, watch the waitstaff. If the majority of them seem disgruntled or upset, things probably aren't great. This often translates to the kitchen, so they probably don't care about your food if they aren't being treated fairly. Another thing to look out for is the cleanliness of the place. If the restaurant seems dirty or unmaintained, the kitchen is in similar shape most of the time. I've heard people say, never order the fish on a Monday, or don't get any specials because it's probably product that's about to go bad, but at my restaurant, that wasn't the case. We got orders bought all throughout the week, and our specials are things we're playing around with to see if it could be added to the menu. So I would just say, be cautious about that sort of stuff. Also, it helps to read reviews. I like to read the 1-star reviews to see why it was rated that way. If a majority of the reviews are for some really stupid crap, and all the other reviews are great, you're likely going to get some really good food and service. You know the ones I'm talking about. Some Karen who left a 1-star review because her water ran out once during a huge crunch or something else totally ridiculous. How does the place actually smell? Does it smell like good food? Then it likely is. Does it smell like perfume or too sterile when there's clearly food on the tables? That could also be a bad sign that they're trying to hide something less than pleasant. And that's all I can think of at the moment. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. If you walk into a restaurant and you hear Gordon Ramsay yelling at the staff, you probably want to leave. Unless it's one of Gordon's restaurants, of course. Why would I want to leave? Listening to Gordon Ramsay yelling at idiots is practically dinner and a show. This isn't so much about sanitary red flags like a lot of these are, but more about saving you money. If you're going to get sushi rolls, make sure you read the ingredients. A lot of places have what amounts to a California roll for a premium price. Here's the best example of what I mean. I worked at a Japanese restaurant for a while, and we had this thing called a volcano roll, and it cost $7.25. A California roll there costs $3.75. The volcano roll was a Cali roll cut into the shape of a triangle and topped with a bit of spicy mayo that's been heated up with about 10 cents worth of fish, literally just a few bits, and that wasn't worth it. You were much better ordering a Cali roll and paying 50 cents extra for spicy mayo on the side and asking them to heat it up. I had one guy come in with a girl and he ordered a couple of regular rolls like spicy tuna and yellowtail along with a volcano roll. When served in the restaurant, unless they ask us, we'd put the sauce on top so it looked like a volcano. When I brought that over, he was like, "Oh, I didn't know you guys put the sauce on it. I've only gotten it for pickup and the sauce was always on the side. I don't really like it. Could you bring me one without the sauce?" I tried not to laugh and I said sure. I went back and the sushi chef asked what was wrong. I told him that he didn't like the sauce and wanted one without. He laughed and said, "All right." So he took a Cali roll, cut it up and put it on the plate. I brought it back to the guy and he was pumped. Basically, this guy paid $7.25 for a roll that would have normally cost him $3.75. And me and the sushi chef got to split a free volcano roll. Normally I would have just told him about it, but the guy was being so arrogant the entire time. I'm guessing to act like he was a sushi expert to impress the girl he was with. I've seen this at a couple of other places too where they slightly dress up a California roll and jack up the price. You don't want to end up like that guy just because you didn't take a few seconds to go over the ingredients. My grandfather was a long-haul trucker and always told me on road trips to look for the places where truckers congregate. They all talk to each other and they'll find the best places along the highways. It's worked for me so far. So in response, this is for greasy spoon places and I don't count gas stations. Also, this advice was given a few decades ago, so things have probably changed since. I still find pretty tasty, albeit likely unsanitary and artery-clogging food for myself this way though. Waitress here, if you see any food coming out that's messy and there's sauce all over the rim of the plate, it likely means that the chefs aren't putting much effort into their meals and they therefore won't be very good. All of the chefs at my work find it so important that everything is presented well, and I agree. So if they miss something, I'll check the plates and point it out, which they always appreciate as it reflects well on them. Businesses with a bunch of signs and specials out front. Lunch special, $4.99. Free appetizer from 5 to 8 p.m. weekdays. BOGO main course Wednesdays all day. That kind of thing. Usually means they're going under and they're trying to drum up business. Unless they're a chain. Also, when you see regular lunch and dinner restaurants that start to offer brunch. Number 1 brunch service is the worst. The chefs hate it, they're usually disgruntled. Number 2 brunch is a moneymaker. Companies charge over the top for thin pancakes, orange juice, and a splash of $4 champagne. Sudden brunch means the place is trying to make more money, charging double and using the chefs that don't want to be there. Reviews where the owner is arguing with the reviewer are a big red flag too. I saw an argument on Yelp where a lady complained her chopstick or something was moldy and gave them 1 star. While it was super unfair to give a 1-star review over something they didn't do, the owner got into it with her and they started fighting on Facebook. Owners that are willing to yell at people who are spending their money are likely to treat their staff the same or worse, meaning their employees are angry or the turnover is high and nobody is trained well. Yeah, I do just want to laser focus on one of the many good points this guy just made. Nobody in the history of restaurant work has ever enjoyed working brunch. That's barely an exaggeration. Cranky, hungover, uncaffeinated people who are possibly on the verge of running late to another commitment are just not fun to serve most of the time, especially when you're just a hungover server or chef yourself. But as a massive hypocrite, I also love eating brunch, so I'll keep perpetuating this restaurant hell. Blood on the vegetables. That's bad. If there are too many items on the menu. If you have 50 combo choices, man, you know half that stuff is frozen, old, or canned. Nothing is going to be great like an In-N-Out burger, it's all going to be meh at best. Stay away from buffet and salad bars. A lot of the time it's the same stuff that just gets refilled over and over. Super gross. I've done bartending and waitressing for a few years. Here's my list. First of all, ignore the bathrooms and kitchen thing. The people in charge of the kitchen generally aren't in charge of the bathrooms. It's normally the server's job. If the restaurant area is busy, we're going to skip that when we can, but we'll probably give it a quick tidy if we use the toilets. Most places opt for paper menus because they can just be chucked away afterwards. It's cleaner this way. However, if the table is sticky and the restaurant area is super quiet, then there's probably a few other sticky areas as well. Check your cutlery. Most cutlery barely gets washed. It gets rubbed with soap, sprayed with water and chucked in a dishwasher. It's then meant to be polished with hot water when it's brought to the table area to set up. This is where we actually check it for leftover grime. If your cutlery is gross, chances are your waitstaff aren't doing their job properly. Don't order fish on Sundays. Most places get their fish deliveries on a Monday and on a Thursday. Fish goes off fairly quickly and on a Sunday it's really not great. If your server has long hair and it's not tied up, check for food in your hair. Kitchens tend to have really strict rules on their staff and you can rarely see them with their hair down and makeup on. If there's a hair in your food, it's probably from your waitress. If your hot food is out quickly, your chef was probably a microwave. If your server visibly has a cold and is still working, don't eat there. They're either not paying their staff enough to have days off, or they're forcing staff to work in conditions where they shouldn't be handling food. The kitchen staff probably get the same treatment and probably have the same illness. It's a good idea to avoid restaurants that sound like Snapple cheese. Remember, the special always looks and sounds great. It's most likely a leftover. Trying to get rid of it. Did it myself as a chef for years. Even if it is stuff that's about to go off, I find that specials are something that most of the time get extra love. The chef that's coming up with it will have some extra creative freedom to make something that they want to make and put in extra effort to make something delicious. That's from my experience anyways. I recently went to a newish barbecue place. I knew the moment I opened the menu it was going to be awful. The place had at least 120 things on the menu that ran the gamut from burgers to lobster thermidor. When you see that, you know it's going to be bad. It means they're trying to do everything rather than focusing on a smaller range of things that they're doing very well. And as I suspected, it was gross. Hair tied up. My God, I worked at a place in Colorado that encouraged waitresses to look date night ready, which meant hair down and fancy, lots of makeup, some cleave if you could manage it. I shed like a fricking dog. My hair was to my waist. Having that crap down while at work was stupid. Guess who rocked a ponytail every shift? Cockroaches lurking around the place. If you see one, there's bound to be more hiding somewhere else. Wow, this brings back the memories. When I was in college, I was working at a hibachi place as a hostess. I routinely had to casually reseat people because a cockroach was crawling up the grill when I went to turn it on. These people were paying $20 to $50 a plate to eat off roach grills. Also, they served sushi, so that's fun to think about. One thing that makes me keep driving past is a sign saying "under new management" or something similar. It means the business has already failed, at least once, and either a new owner has come in thinking they'll be able to cut corners better than the last owner, Or it's the same owner trying to save face by saying someone new is in charge when there isn't really anyone. Steer clear of these places. Oh, and update. Look, I realize I've been overly harsh with my initial comment, and some of the replies had some good points about how these signs could actually lead to positive changes. I was definitely speaking from my own experiences from restaurants that have done this, and also ones that my friends have shared in the past. I still believe more often than not there won't be significant changes done to improve these places, and that while some people truly mean well, others are just trying to put lipstick on a pig. My wife trained as a chef, and I cooked in fine dining in college. A long menu is a red flag. If they have 40 different entrees, that means they're preparing a bunch of frozen ingredients, or they have the exact same entree rebranded as a different dish based on the sauce. Short menus tend to mean fresher ingredients. If it's an Italian place and they serve butter with their bread, it's not a huge red flag, but a really nice, authentic place serves bread with oil and vinegar. Reading these made me realize that the 24-hour diner up the street has every red flag ever, but I don't care because they have the best omelets and the best patty melts, and I can get both together for under $10, plus the waitress will tell me how much her coworkers suck, so I get a little entertainment too. How did you talk your way out of getting killed? I'm 19. First time in Europe, started in Italy visiting relatives, and on the first night I went out for a walk. A group of guys looking like trouble pushed me around and then showed me their switchblades, demanding money, which I seemed to obviously have since I stood out as a foreigner by my clothes. Except all I had on me was €20 and a Johnny, because I was so naive from hearing how easy it was to get tail in Europe, I was expecting local girls to just see me and approach me to get busy. And I explained as such to these guys in my broken 1960s Italian gleaned from my parents. They laughed their butts off and wished me luck. Cousin with mental health issues threw a table at me but missed. He grabbed the leg and put me to the ground and shouted, "I'm gonna frickin' kill you, smash your skull." And I responded with, "If you're gonna do that, let's not do it in front of our family." It worked. I was babysitting for my cousins, aged 5 and 3. I was 14 at the time. The 5-year-old found his dad's gat and was waving it around like a toy. He was pointing it at things and pretending to blast them, not putting his finger on the trigger, thankfully. At one point, he pointed it at me and pretended to be a bank robber. I told him if he handed me the piece, he'd get the package of Oreos on the counter and we could all have some. It actually worked, and I stuck the weapon on a high shelf until my aunt and uncle came home. As it turned out, it was loaded. My aunt made my uncle buy a safe and put all the weapons in the garage after that. In short, for the love of God, don't leave your pieces where your young children can find them. No matter how much you tell them it's not a toy, they'll still treat it like a toy. Whoa, just wait a minute. That's what I said to the guy who'd just slammed me face first into an ATM and drew a blade on me as I staggered to my feet. I kicked him and ran out of the bank's vestibule. By the way, he went to prison. Thanks, ADA Heinrich. I talked my way out of getting shanked when I was being robbed. I don't know if he would have murdered me, but he definitely would have messed me up. I told him to chill and put the knife away and he could have whatever the frick he wanted. So he put his knife away and went through my crap while I just stood there annoyed. I went for breakfast with the girl right afterwards and carried on with my day. My brother was attacked in our house by a guy with a knife. My brother didn't know the guy had a blade when he put the guy in a headlock. When he whistled for Dad, the guy dropped the knife and covered his ears. By the way, my brother can whistle at about 120 decibels, louder if he's angry. So my brother pulled the guy's hand off his ear, put his mouth to the guy's ear, and just whistled as loud as he could 4 or 5 times. When my dad got to them and threw the guy out the door, he couldn't even stand up straight as his equilibrium had been completely thrown off. He's probably still deaf. Good God, your brother has a whistle with more percussive force than a shout? Honestly, I know I should be focusing on the life-death angle, but this is insane. He flashbanged someone just with the force of the air coming out of his mouth. That's some X-Men crap. I was accosted by a young kid with a Glock. He couldn't have been more than 13. I can't remember the exact conversation, but basically he looked at me and said, "Give me everything you have and I'll let you go." I wanted to freak out, but something in me said to remain calm. I said something like, "Is that a real piece or an airsoft?" And he pulled out the clip. Sure enough, it was real, surprisingly. I said, "Look kid, I don't have anything but $5 in this crappy phone that isn't really going to get you anything. Is this really worth life in prison if you shoot me?" He looked at me, looked at his weapon, started crying, turned around and walked away. I did call the police and alert them that there was a kid walking around 14th Street brandishing a weapon, but by the time they got to where I was, the kid was long gone. I told the cops what direction he'd gone in and what he looked like and all that stuff, but I'm not sure if anything came of it. I'm not entirely sure how close I was to being murdered. This took place back when I worked the register at McDonald's. I was around 10, we weren't 24-hour and we'd be closing soon. In walks a guy that's drunk off his butt. He comes up to the counter and starts chatting with me about nothing in particular, mostly nonsense I can't remember. But I started to get the impression he wasn't just drunk. I was doing my best to just humor him, waiting for him to leave, when out of nowhere he says, "If I was gonna kill everyone in here, I'd kill you first, because you look like you'd know what to do." A bit of a morbid joke, I thought, and I said, thanks? At this point, he pulled out a piece from his waistband and pointed it at me. It wasn't like a full-on point, more like he was limply holding the weapon in my general direction. I didn't know what to do and only hoped to God he was still joking. He then said, "Bang," and tucked the gun back into his waistband. I think he just wanted to let me know he could kill me if he wanted to. He left shortly after that. I informed my manager and was later told that that man was both a regular and longtime friend of his, and he tried to downplay what had happened. I left that job shortly after for school. When I was 22, I had a 9mm put in my face because I was drunk and probably hit on this guy's girlfriend. I apologized and told him he was a lucky guy. I don't know how that worked. It was my sister's 21st birthday and the whole family and a couple of my sister's friends decided to let's all go out to a bar. We went 3 cars deep to this small bar. Night starts off fine, everyone's dancing and drinking, then this group of 15 people came in and as soon as they walk in, they started bumping into people, leering at these girls and challenging their boyfriends to do something. I tell my girl we gotta watch out for these buttholes, so we stay clear of them until the end of the night. Me and my girl kept to ourselves, just watching everyone, and we see these jerks surrounding my sister's friend, so I go and pull him away from the situation and ask what happened. He just complimented the guys on their hats because we're 49ers fans. So the guys leave. We head out about 20 minutes later, I grab my sister and her 2 friends and we head to the car. As we're walking to the car, I see 3 guys from this same group walk towards my car from the other side of the parking lot. I tell everyone to get in the car, and my girl is forcing my sisters and her friends inside while I approach these guys. I say, "What's good?" They answer, "What's up, homie? You guys got a problem?" "No, whatever happened inside, just leave it inside. It's my sister's birthday. We're not trying to have any crap go down. We good?" I should have known some crap was about to go down. One of them was holding his shirt over his face, and the other had his hat down real low and was holding his waist. But the main guy looks at them and said, "Yeah, we're good." And I shake his hand and then the other guy's hand, but then the guy with his hat real low won't shake my hand and won't take his hand off his waist, so I say, "Your boy says we're cool. We don't want no problems." At this moment, my uncle and my best friend come around the corner and start yelling, "Yo, hey!" And that's when it happened. All 3 guys pulled out gats and started shooting in the air and then shot towards my uncle and best friend. Everyone starts screaming, but I didn't flinch. It was really weird. I just looked around and one of the guys says, "What about him?" and looks right at me and just says, "Ah, frick it." And they just ran back to their cars. I walk to my car and drive down to where my uncle and friend were, stop the car and just hear my mum and aunt screaming that my uncle's been shot. The cops came. I spent the next 2 hours talking to them about what had happened, what they looked like, stuff like that. Found out why they approached us later that night. Apparently, while my sisters, uncles, and friends were outside smoking, these guys came outside to smoke, and while smoking, said some racist crap to our friends, and they ended up pushing and shoving, and my sister decked one of them. They found the guys later, and we testified against them. They're each serving between 15 to 20 years. My uncle was really lucky they shot him in the back, and they missed all of his organs. I found out later, before they left the bar, they were in the bathroom snorting crystal, and that they were planning on just walking up to the car and unloading their weapons. I almost got knifed in the Dominican Republic by these 2 kids in this tiny town by Hobbies. They saw me walking around at night and came to my hotel with knives. I was out on the balcony in front of my room, and they came up to me not saying a word but brandishing a large enough knife. So I put my hands up and real cool-like reached into my pocket and handed them like 200 in the local currency, and they ran off. The kicker is that my wife was in an unlocked room right there with like maybe 25 grand and all of our stuff. And I made enough noise about it talking calmly, but loudly enough that I heard the door lock, thank God. My first thought was, they want money. My second was, what if they get in that room with my wife? That second question still haunts me. Anyway, so this town is small and I walk over to the cop station and explain what happened and the cops are like, "Oh yeah, we probably know who it is. Come back tomorrow morning at 9 and we'll have you identify them." I came back at 9 and they had both of them in custody. Never did get my money back, but whatever. Wonder how much cash those cops got. It could be none, but this might be a weird stopgap measure to make tourists feel like justice has been served and maybe make some money on the side still. Granted, the conversation was pretty one-sided, but here we go. My wife and I were in a parking lot at a Walmart. The guy wanted the car and had a knife, but I had a 9mm. It didn't happen to me, but my dad was getting gas in a particularly sketchy part of town that he wasn't usually in. A man approached my dad as he was filling his gas tank, points a weapon at my dad and shouts, "Give me your wallet!" Instead, my dad pulls the gas nozzle out of his truck and sprays the guy. At the time, my dad smoked and pulled out his Zippo lighter and began to strike it. The best part is that the robber called the cops on my dad for trying to light him on fire. In the end, my dad got away with nothing and the other guy got hauled away in a cop car. My friend's mother was bringing in the groceries. As she was walking the bags up the stairs, she turned to find a man who'd snuck into the garage after her car, pointing a rifle at her. "Shh," she said with a finger to her lips. "You have to get out of here. You're going to be in big trouble." He looked around, panicked, and ran. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad was about 25 at the time, probably 35 years ago now. He lived in a bad neighborhood, and after getting a packet of cigs from a 7-Eleven, he was sitting in his car for a second and a young guy came up to the window with a gat. To my dad, he said, "Give me all your money or I'll kill you right here, right now." Dad said, "Look, I have $30, and frankly, that frickin' money is mine. You're gonna have to kill me for it. Is it worth the blood of a human and most likely life in prison for $30 fricking dollars?" He said the guy had this sort of, well, whatever, attitude about it, and gave him a goodbye tap on his car like he just came up to say hello, and walked away. He said the guy was real casual about it, oddly so. He didn't sleep well for a few months after that experience. I was walking home from work at a pizza place. Two guys approached me wielding knives. I'm wearing headphones, so I can't hear what they said, but I assume it had to do with them taking my stuff. I threw my pizza box at the first guy frisbee style, threw my drink at the second guy normal style, and took off running. Didn't talk my way out except for the "oh frick" when I realized what was happening, but it was still crazy. I don't know if this counts, but I was alone by a lake one evening a few years ago. Insects were humming around, their wings glistening in the fading sunlight, and fish swam near my feet. It was super chill, and I've rarely felt more peaceful. Until someone moved in the bushes. Now, normally, I would have ignored this. People came and went from this spot fairly frequently. It was a popular makeout spot. But something felt off this time. The person was taking too long, like they were trying to be quiet. I thought maybe it was a couple messing around, so I got to my feet and started to leave. As I turned to the exit, a man stepped from the bushes. He had a metal rod in one hand and a cord in the other. My first thought was he was just collecting trash. But a second later, before I could even register why, I was suddenly viscerally angry. I wanted to hurt this man more than I've ever wanted to hurt anyone before. I think he saw the crazy in my eyes or something though, because he hesitated and forced this weird smile. I was unarmed, but I slowly reached around my back like I was putting my hand on a weapon, and he moved back into the bushes. A few moments later, he re-emerged empty-handed and asked how the fish were today. I said good, flashed a smile, and left. In short, I crazy-vibed a suspicious stranger into small talk. He might have only been there to spearfish, looking back on it. Nearly being murdered is maybe a bit of an over-exaggeration, but I was surrounded by 10 skinheads with baseball bats once. They were known to sometimes just beat the crap out of people for fun. But I was drunk as frick, so I just laughed all the time while they did stupid stuff like pushing me. Then they'd had their fun and they let me get into my taxi without beating me up with their baseball bats. This isn't actually my story, but my boyfriend's. Some men broke into his childhood home while he, his brother and mother were all there and made them get on the ground asking where someone was. Turns out the neighbor was a substance dealer and they got the house wrong. They threatened his family but then figured out they were in the wrong house and left, stealing the house's wireless landline. Oddly enough, they didn't take the cell phones. I don't know if this guy wanted to murder us, but he was definitely up to no good. My mum and I were just walking somewhere. I don't remember to where, I was much younger, but it was in the south of France somewhere. There was this guy who came around the corner and got in our way, telling us he had a shooter in his pocket, which was probably BS, and that we needed to give him everything to pass. My mum grew up in Paris and walked through shady parts when she was younger, and knows how to react, so she just straight up told him, no thanks, and slapped his shoulder a little bit to push him out of the way and we went by him. Yeah, in my time I've heard a few stories about people getting out of sticky situations this way, just by saying no and basically brushing them off. I've got to say, it is a play, and I don't know if I can recommend it. It probably relies a lot on how confident your assailant is, and that's a real random factor. One time, my mother was driving to Tanzania with my uncle while she was pregnant with me. It was early in the afternoon, so she was extremely shocked to find a bunch of armed robbers waiting on the side of the road, like a bunch of hyenas waiting for their prey to come to them. They started waving their weapons around, telling my uncle and mother to come out of the car. I believe that they had the intention to kill. However, this is where it gets interesting. The leader of that gang took one look at my mother's belly, saw that it had a bump, and simply let them leave. My mother tells me that when the leader saw that she was pregnant, his eyes filled with remorse. Maybe he had been a former father as well. Anyway, they took my uncle's wallet and bade us goodbye. To this day, I keep on telling my uncle that I saved his life. I am a motorcycle rider. Just over a year ago, I purchased my Senna 20S, and at the time it met all of my expectations. Great sound quality for music, clear calls, and contact with my fellow riders. Little did I know that one day it would save my life. On February 28, 2016, around 9:30 p.m., I came home from a ride. I got off my bike in the driveway where I was met by a man with a sidearm who had broken into my home. He demanded that I enter the house, and as I approached the door, threw my cell phone onto the ground. As I crossed the threshold, I was forced to the ground and my hands and feet were bound with phone cord. The intruder resumed his vicious ransacking of my house while I lay there in my helmet, wondering what was going to happen to me when he was done. Sometime later, my roommate pulled up and parked his car in the garage. The intruder ran out the front door to confront him. I heard a scuffle outside for a few minutes, after which my roommate was forced into the house, bloodied, beaten, and then bound in a separate room from myself. The destruction of the house continued once again. He discovered the safe, sidearm, and rifle cases, violently demanding the keys and combinations while kicking my roommate. He began speaking irrationally about how he was looking for kiddie smut and rifles, how someone sent him to our house months earlier and he'd been watching the house for a couple of days. He was going to hold us for about 2 days while he cleaned up his fingerprints and burned part of the house to get rid of any DNA. He'd then drive us to the middle of nowhere and leave us for dead. While he was spending time in the back room attempting to break into the safe, I was able to break one of my hands free and turn my sonar on. The moment the sonar said, "phone connected," I had a small glimmer of hope. The noise of the intruder breaking into the safe granted me an opportunity to access the voice command speed dial system on the sonar. Whispering quietly, I didn't necessarily care who it ended up calling, I just prayed for anyone to answer. My father, who's 3 hours ahead on the Eastern time zone, answered, and I repeatedly whispered, 911, 911, 911. He eventually replied back to me, 911? Confirming he knew there was a problem. I then started repeatedly whispering my address, at which point the intruder came around the corner and yelled at me, "What's that noise?" I told him, "It's just the radio playing in the helmet and I can't turn it off." He proceeded to take the hammer to the side of my helmet while it was still on my head, destroying the sonar. He grabbed the remains and threw them in the toilet. He then started a fire in the fireplace to burn random items from around the house, including his own shoes, which he replaced with the shoes directly from my feet. My father eventually tried calling back, but when my cell phone rang, the intruder smashed it with a hammer and threw it on the fire as well. The police finally arrived and noticed the blood on the ground from the scuffle, and they called for backup. The intruder became nervous. He unbound me and instructed me to answer the door and send the cops away. I agreed, stood up and approached the front door. The police were shouting, "Local police department, open the door," over and over again, and my roommate shouted back from the other room, "We're in here!" repeatedly. The intruder ran to the other room to silence him. I reached out and opened the door to 5 or 6 officers with weapons drawn. I ran out into the front yard yelling, "Hostage!" with my hands up, hoping that no one would shoot. As I was about to be restrained, behind me the intruder slammed the door. The police quickly withdrew back into the street. I was escorted by an officer as fast as possible to the street, barely able to keep my footing as we moved, dragged through the front lawn and placed on the back of a squad car. I updated them on the situation inside the house and how to distinguish between my roommate and the intruder. The local SWAT team was called in to secure the house. After another 2 hours or so, my roommate was finally able to escape his bindings and make his way out of the house, beat up but safe. The intruder ended up escaping out the back door of the house somewhere in that 2-hour window of time. The entire ordeal lasted around 6 hours. The suspect has been found in jail from unrelated charges and was linked to the case with evidence found at my house. Okay, June 2017. After a year of bullcrapping the court system with an attempt at getting off on mental disorder and the state psych hospital saying he's fit to stand trial, he was sentenced to prison for 26 years. In short, guy broke in, I was held hostage with threats to kill me, my roommate came home and the intruder attempted to discharge a weapon, but the safety was still on. Called 911 from Bluetooth in my motorcycle helmet. The guy got away for a time. I don't know if this guy was going to murder us, but it was super sketchy. My mum and I were walking back from a baseball game one summer after I got back from college. My mum had had a few, so I was driving. On the way back, some sketchy dude started following us. I took a turn towards our car in the parking lot and he started muttering things. I told him to go away, but he ignored me. I gave my mum my shirt that I got at the game and told her to run to the car. The guy then lunged at me after she took off, so I body slammed him and he landed on his butt. I ran to the car, locked it, and we flew out of there. That was a scary yet exhilarating moment, and we just drove home after that. I live near a pretty bad city, so things like this are expected, so we saw no point in calling the police or the stadium security. But it was frightening nonetheless. What are some dark mind tricks that actually work for manipulators? Silence. If you want to know something, ask the question and then just wait. People want to fill the silence and will talk and talk. The best way to get the right answer is to propose a wrong one. They call it the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you want to be an effective liar, build a reputation for being honest. The more you're known as being reliable, the easier it is to deceive and manipulate. It's not terribly complex, I know. I acted like I couldn't lie because of this trick, and now I actually can't lie. Crap, I went in too deep. One that I've found effective when someone's being rude to you is to stay completely silent and stare at them. It'll make them feel incredibly uncomfortable and they'll usually act civilly after a few moments. As a disclaimer, don't do this to people who are exhibiting aggressive behavior or whilst in an unsafe, non-public environment. That won't work on the local thug in the street and will likely cause you harm. This is a tactic meant to be used on otherwise mature adults in a safe environment. Staring at people's foreheads irritates them quite a lot. If you talk good behind people's backs, it'll get them, trust me, it'll get to everyone. I do this all the time. Just wait till those chumps find out that I actually like them and genuinely wish them well. One thing that my dad does, he might be completely unaware of it, is when you give him good news, he always exaggerates it back to you, thus forcing you to downplay your own accomplishment. I honestly don't think he's consciously doing it, it drives me absolutely crazy. Like, hey, I've got amazing news, I got promoted to vice president. Wow, that's great, so senior vice president. No, just vice president. Oh, well, that's still pretty good, I guess. And now the wind is out of my sails. If you make a favor seem bigger than it is before asking it, the person on the receiving end is much more likely to help. Huh, anyone else feel like they've probably been hoodwinked by this one at least once in their life? Seriously, I might have done stuff I would never do otherwise just because I was anticipating being asked to do something much worse. You got me, guys. Change the perspective from I to we, and people will automatically align themselves with you. I'm a teacher, and this is how I get my students to go along with completing tasks that they don't necessarily find fun. For example, okay, it's home time, we need to clean up the class, or we need to complete this section of reading before we can move on to our next activity. It makes it always seem like a team effort. If someone doesn't want to give you specific information like tuition costs or hours expected, give them an example that's completely unreasonable. They'll usually immediately give you an exact number and feel embarrassed for pretending not to know. So I'll say, so how much does your C++ course cost? And they'll say, it really depends on what your goals are. Don't you have a beginner's course? Can you give me a price range? We can work with you to fit your individual needs. Okay, so is it like $10 for access to all your courses, or oh no, we have a subscription for $99 a month. Or you can buy the beginner's course for $120. Not useful very often, but it works every time. People start to believe something if they're told it over and over and over, even if it goes against everything they know. That's why the news is so important to pretty much every government on Earth. They get to decide what we hear over and over. Just putting it out there that if you familiarize yourself with a lot of the things that are said here, you can more easily guard yourself from others who can attempt to use them on you. Mirroring is incredible. If you can pull it off from a simple swinging of a chair or a gentle smile, you can actually control their presence. I did some anti-mirroring to a salesman at my door once. I leaned against my doorframe, he leaned against my porch post. As soon as he did it, I stood up straight. He stood up straight. I leaned against my doorframe again. Rinse and repeat for about a minute. He lost his train of thought, got nervous, and said he had to go. It was kind of funny. If you say something often enough, people will start to believe it after a while. And once a couple more people are saying it, it will exponentially explode through whatever population is listening. The wording of the questions often influences the answer. For example, when asked the question, "How fast were the cars going when they crashed?" people give, on average, an estimated speed that's faster than when the question is formulated as, "At what velocity were the cars going when they collided?" The first question also gives a bias in that fast implies high speed, so will likely garner an inflated figure. I have a fun one. Working in retail, I've learned that if you hand someone something while they're talking, they'll take it, put it in their pocket or purse or whatever, and then have no recollection of you ever having given them it. It's worked on every person I've tried it with. And no, I didn't make anyone shoplift, it's usually their receipts, pens, or the credit card slips. Then after them talking, they'll ask for it and I'll tell them they pocketed it. But I learned this is a real psychological trick and also to wait until they're done talking to hand them something. I have a coworker who annoys the crap out of me by taking up my time talking. I'm a welder and I fit parts for other welders to finish, so there are people waiting for me to do my job, so any time spent talking slows everyone down. When he starts talking to me while I'm busy, I ask him a question, then hand him some trash like an empty soda can or a print or something. Then I start walking back to his work area. When we get there and walk in, as soon as he takes a breath or pauses, I say, "Oh, hey, let me throw that out for you." I take the trash back and walk out of his area. He never follows and he thinks I'm super helpful and friendly. People want to be acknowledged, accepted, and appreciated. It takes almost nothing to give them that, but empires have risen and fell because of it. People will be so happy that you've given it, even if they know they're being manipulated. They'll ignore the manipulation for the sake of what you're giving them. When walking in a crowded area, look where you're going and not at the other people. They'll naturally move out of your line of sight, making it quicker to move around. If you want someone to like you, ask them to do small favors for you and be very appreciative when they comply. Positive reinforcements for tasks, just like training a dog. The book you want is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That crap works. Don't overuse it, though. Sunk cost. Basically, any time or effort or money that's already been expended or spent tends to be factored into decision-making, even though it shouldn't. When I met my wife, she'd always finish her drinks even if she didn't like them because she paid for them. I asked her, "If you've already paid for them, then the money's already gone. Why suffer through a drink you don't like if there's literally no change in outcome as opposed to not drinking it, except not enjoying it? This is why buying a car takes so long. You spent so much time already that you almost feel like you have to buy it. You've invested time and you need to get something for that investment. And oh my gosh, I do not want to go through this again." Waiting several seconds or up to a minute to say something after someone has given you an offer or asked you for something that will make what you say next highly likely to be agreed with. Most people hate uncomfortable silence, especially salespeople. Every mistake I make at work, I go out of my way to admitting to. For some reason, that makes me more trustworthy. I do the same, and I also go out of my way to sing the praises of anyone who's helped me. Makes people want to work with you, and why not? That's who I want to work with. Be honest, don't throw people under the bus, and telegraph your thank yous and you can ask for plenty of favors. I don't know how dark this one is. It kind of butts right up against just being honest and following the very actually good practice of giving credit where it's due. I mean, unless you're using them exclusively to hoard goodwill so you can cash it in for favors later, or avoid blame for something when you finally do lie. If that's the case, you're just a long-con bad person with strange priorities. My boss likes having meetings after 5 p.m. and even though I technically can be there for it, I don't want to be. So I tell him I have an important class I'm going to at exactly 5:45. I show up for about 5 to 10 minutes of the meeting and then I leave. He thinks I'm an amazing team player for going out of my way to hop on for just a few minutes, when in reality I have no class to attend and I hate those meetings. Don't react when someone is getting unnecessarily angry. It drives them crazy. Having a heated argument, ask the other person if they're okay because they're breathing really hard. They'll stop arguing and try to pay attention to their breathing, resulting in the end of that discussion. People will be more favorable to your idea if they think it's their idea. In a competitive environment, if you notice that your opponent is a beginner or showing signs of anxiety, ask them, "Are you nervous?" while trying to act as nonchalant as possible. I'll even yawn if I can. This always gets in people's heads at Street Fighter if they aren't mentally strong to begin with. I was a gymnast in college. When the younger hotshots were warming up for competition, just before warm-ups end and it all gets real, one of us would say, "Wow, that's a great trick. One question, when you're doing that insane maneuver on the apparatus, when do you breathe?" It screws them up every time. When someone says the correct answer, ask, "Are you sure?" and watch the self-doubt rip their soul out. Former schoolteacher here. Giving the wrong answer online to get the correct one. Also, the Kubrick stare, with the head forward just a little bit, really makes people leave you the frick alone. Certified hypnotist here. You wanted dark, so here you go. Leading the topic by stating something you know the subject will agree with, transitioning into a restatement of whatever it is they agreed with and altering it slightly, ending with a rhetorical question leaning towards agreement. Like, isn't that right? If you're patient, slow, and careful about this, you can get people to concede or agree to nearly anything without even noticing. Number 2, and this one is incredibly frickin' simple, consistently thank everyone for very, very basic things you might not even think to thank someone for. Think moving out of the way for you, or handing you a water bottle from a few feet away. Once you make the interaction consistent enough, they will be used enough to the praise that it will be missed. Then don't thank them for one or two things, and they'll very frequently go out of their way in order to earn your thanks again. All of these answers are what are taught in sales technique seminars. The next time you get in an elevator, face towards the rear the whole ride. It freaks the other people out and it makes me laugh. It's the same principle behind stopping on the sidewalk and staring up. Sooner or later, someone else is going to stop and look to see what you're gawking at. If you want to extract agreement from someone you know reasonably well, begin the conversation by talking about occasions in the past when you've cooperated to achieve a common goal. 1 or 2 examples is enough. This primes them to go along with your current proposal. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. The power of suggestion is incredibly potent. Most people understand how this tool can affect others. For example, I had a sociology class in high school, it was that or health, and we had to build and conduct a psychology and sociology experiment and write a report on our findings. We were in groups of 4. We had free rein to do what we wanted, but it couldn't be immoral or unethical, but being the group of antisocial, rebellious teens we were, we decided to do an experiment on a suggestion. It was relatively simple. We picked 3 subjects and chose a positive and negative suggestion, and the third was our control. Now, we picked 3 people, 1 popular, 1 not so popular, and someone in the middle, the control. These subjects were picked up, so each one of the group members would have an interaction every class period for 1 whole day. For the popular girl, subject A, we decided to simply ask her if she was feeling alright because she looked pale. Unpopular male, subject B, was asked why they didn't speak up more in class and they should do it. We chose suggestions that would be counter to their personalities. Control, or subject C, was simply asked how their day was going. By the end of the experiment, subject A had gone home sick after 3 class periods. Subject B had an overall increase in participation that lasted several days after the conclusion of the test, and Subject C showed baseline behavior. Now, we did get into trouble because what we did was unethical, but the teacher was so impressed with our report that he let us slide and made us apologize to the participants. If you want to emphasize a point, no matter how small, change your vocabulary. For example, instead of saying, "I've been doing that for 8 years, say, "I've been doing this for almost a decade." All of these answers are giving me trust issues. Asking someone to do you a favor makes them like you more. It seems wrong on the surface, but it's shown to be true. So ask your boss for small personal favors every now and again. Also, if you want someone who has no opinion of you to think well of you, you can try this psychotic move. Act rude towards them. Not overtly, just some small transgressions. Then seek them out the next day and apologize for your behavior, stating that you had a bad day and later regretted whatever you did. Now that they know you, wave high when you see them. They'll end up with a positive opinion of you. The narrator would like to thank all of the psychopaths and actual psychologists who wrote in with contributions to this video on ways to look at other people as puppets to be controlled. This has been fascinating. I hope none of you viewing it use this for evil. If someone's incorrect, like you know 100% they are, but the correction would have little or no bearing on the conversation or argument, just keep it to yourself. It's not worth embarrassing or belittling them and halting the conversation. I'm looking at you, mother-in-law. This is some very good advice. I've been the know-it-all for most of my life. It hasn't gotten me anything positive. It doesn't impress people, doesn't even make you seem smart most of the time. It just makes you look like a negative person who combats everything people say. Plus, like you mentioned, it usually disturbs the conversation instead of adding anything to it. When it's actually necessary to correct someone, people will take it less seriously because you're always dramatic about everything. Don't be like me. Being quiet to allow other people more space to speak. When someone gives a brief answer, instead of responding, be quiet and see if they expound further. If they're going to say more, they will within 5 to 10 seconds. Whenever I want to help someone with something but I know their pride gets in the way or they don't want to impose, I ask them a favor first even if I don't really need it. Examples would be like asking a peer how they arrived at a solution for XYZ, and then repaying the favor by going, "You want to see something cool I learned recently?" and showing them how to do something more efficiently or correctly. Or when you know your parents' heater is broken but they insist on calling a repairman instead of troubling you, and you suddenly need to borrow sugar, but while you're over there you might as well check out that heater. People like to feel helpful and I like to give unsolicited advice. It works out. Not so dark, but humans have predictable patterns when choosing stuff at random. If you ask 100 people to pick a random number between 1 and 10, a great deal of people choose 3 or 7. Even numbers, highest or lowest, 1 and 10, and the middle number, 5, don't feel random enough. So when I play board games like Catan, or card games where others have to pick a random card out of my hand, I always put my most valuable card on either side, not in the middle, since the middle feels more random. If you answer any insult coming from a 12-year-old boy with, "Your mum," they'll get insecure. I used to lead people to the bathroom, telling them I've got to go to get them out of my office, and then if they follow me into the bathroom, I'd go into the stall and pretend to go number 2. People love talking about themselves. Ask questions about their personal lives. Act interested in everything they say. I've carried on entire working relationships with people who couldn't tell you anything about me beyond my physical appearance or incorrectly assumed that I had their exact same interests and opinions. After you get to that point, they're not really sharing information with a stranger as much as with a psychological extension of themselves. 95% of a lie is the truth. Ask someone to draw you a picture in 10 to 15 seconds. Most of the time, they'll draw a house. Wrong. The most common quick drawing subject is actually a face. Actually, I have a few that are going to change your life. If someone's standing too close to you on public transport, all you have to do is throw a handful of dried lentils. They'll be focused on collecting the valuable food and will move away. Works every time. If you see someone attractive at a party or some other event where courtship is appropriate and they're not quite noticing you, here's a good trick to employ. When they're not looking, put a handful of dried lentils in their drink. When they notice and start looking around, make sure you're able to make eye contact, then wink at them so they know it's you. They'll be grateful for the valuable food and will immediately know that you're one piping hot piece of slam meat. The last one's a little risky, so proceed with caution. Earlier today, my boss was being quite disrespectful, but not in an overt way. It was more of a subtle but deliberate undermining, careful to only be noticeable to me. This is something they've been doing consistently for quite some time now, and it's had a negative effect on my reputation and working relationships. So, here's what I did. This can be applied to similar situations, but again, please use good judgment. I threw a handful of dried lentils in their face as hard as I could. They were absolutely furious and started shouting at me, bringing out their true nature for everyone to see. I just filed a complaint with HR, and I'm laughing all the way to the bank. I used to work at a chain bookstore, and part of the job was getting all the books people took off the shelves, took to another part of the store to flip through and then left, and then put them back in their proper spot. It was a lot of work I didn't want to do. I'd get the pile, go talk to a coworker, keep eye contact, but hold out the pile of books to them while talking. Whoever I was talking to took the pile. Every time. I'd walk away before they noticed they had them. Being over-the-top friendly usually counteracts aggressive behavior. I used to have this customer who was always super rude and verbally aggressive on the phone. I started being extremely friendly to her the second I picked it up. She just didn't have the chance to be rude to me. Doesn't work with everyone though. The smarter they are, the faster they're onto you. But it's usually the dumbest people who are the most aggressive to customer support anyway. Another tip is to always be friendly to customer support. I did support for a long time. Guess which customers got the fastest help? Or got helped with problems that technically were their own to solve, but I helped them anyway, or at the very least sent them in the right direction, or sent them a link to the correct page in the online manual. Guess which customers paid for every single second they were on the phone, plus the time it took me to register that time, and which ones I didn't even bill if it was just a 5-minute phone call. Friendliness pays off in a lot of ways, short-term and long-term, even if you're faking it most of the time. Yep, treat customer service well whenever you can afford to. It can sometimes pay dividends, folks. If you don't feel like talking to someone, let them talk while listening and slowly just look away and avoid eye contact while doing a small task, and don't acknowledge anything they're saying after a bit. I do this on accident because of ADHD, but I noticed it one day as the person walked away mid-sentence, and now I use it when I'm overwhelmed and just want to be left alone. Please know I was still listening to them, I just kinda zoned out. Self-depreciating humor will win people over. You can't go too far, it can be depressing. But if you show you don't have a huge ego and you can take a joke, most people will be prone to like you. It works on the lower rungs for relatability, but I reckon it's perceived as weakness if you employ it at the top of the food chain. That said, not everyone who happens to be situated at the top of the food chain is actually top dog, so know your audience guideline applies. Not exactly dark, but if you touch someone, they're just your friend now. Works like 9 out of 10 times, and when I say touch, I mean appropriately, like touching someone on the arm when you express emotion, like, oh, that's great, or oh, that's too bad. Does anyone here notice that most of these tips require interpersonal presence? Most of our communication is nonverbal. Written communication, by its nature, is more difficult to hack. With written communication, you can still directly focus and praise people's qualities. Use phrases like, thank you for your patience, instead of apologizing, sorry, I'll fix it later. It removes the blame from you and makes the other person feel better. If you don't think about it, your brain will eventually use that as a coping mechanism, and you'll never remember anything ever to prevent from getting traumatized anymore. One time I was volunteering at a shelter, and this guy was creeping on me and wouldn't leave me alone. My female co-volunteer and I kept telling him to go away and that he was making us uncomfortable. I finally just smiled and said, bye, and waved. He finally walked away. So if someone's talking to you and you don't really want to talk to them, I guess instead of giving out commands, just say cordially and confidently, bye or have a nice day, like you're assuming they're leaving, and they'll likely feel compelled to walk away. It's worked on bullies in the past, too. What made a mother-in-law absolutely hate their child's spouse? My daughter-in-law was a cheating addict who strung my son along through a whole pregnancy full of lies. The baby came out a few too many shades off to pass as my son's. She even tried to take my son to court for child support until her lawyer laid eyes on my son and told her to forget it. She stole and pawned a whole lot of my son's belongings along the way too. She never got clean, never got help, and has done this whole thing to yet another man since then. My grandmother hated my mother because my father was married once before and it doesn't count the second time. Basically, she preferred his ex to my mum because divorce. And I'm not making assumptions based on her behavior or things my mother said. She actually said that to me in those exact words many times, as she gave my half-siblings gifts, but not me. Grandpa snuck me gifts behind her back though, because he wasn't an awful person. She was clearly a horrible person, not an average mother-in-law who just dislikes her daughter-in-law. My parents did as much as they could to shelter me from it, but my mum suffered her treatment for 20 years before the universe finally saw fit to take Grandma down. As an adult, after our father died, I had to explain to my oldest half-brother why my father limited contact with his awesome grandma, who was apparently the nicest woman. She brought my half-brother a car. And why it wasn't just my mother being a gargantuan witch who can't get along with anyone. I'm a mother of 3 sons. One of them is married, and until very recently, I absolutely adored my daughter-in-law. She was the daughter I didn't have. They gave me the most amazing granddaughter. My daughter-in-law did, however, bring a level of drama to our lives that we were not accustomed to and that was hard to adjust to. Being a household of primarily males, there wasn't much drama before. The daughter-in-law was 9 years older than my son. They started dating when my son was 19. I was a bit concerned about the age difference, but I always treated her respectfully and with kindness. They're amidst divorce now, and I'm not thrilled with her behavior over the past 6 months. My reason is that she knew she was dating a very young man, and they knew when they decided to marry and have a child that the young man was still quite young. My daughter-in-law remained flummoxed that my son, who is 23 now, hasn't turned into a 30-year-old adult like she is. Some red flags did go off for me as I observed her own relationship with her mother. They were quite harsh with each other, but I tried not to let that affect my acceptance of her, and she became an integral part of our family. Nonetheless, she's treated my son poorly and I no longer like her. It's got absolutely nothing to do with competing with her, it has to do with how she's treating him and us. This potential mother-in-law is open to any potential daughter-in-law or same-sex partner any of my boys become involved with. I want my sons to have loving relationships in their lives, and I would never do anything to hinder whoever they choose to share their lives with. Not all mothers-in-law are horrible people. This may be one of the few answers straight from the horse's mouth, as it were, because I think a lot of the aggression the matriarchs in question feel might not be something they've come to terms with. A lot of them more likely have unconscious biases. However, I'd say that this mother-in-law did a good job of outlining the cause of her distaste in a way that doesn't seem unreasonable. Gold-digging harlot. My grandma hated my uncle's wife. I think it was pure jealousy. Grandma was a bit of a controlling type and hated being replaced. She treated my uncle like a child. Sadly, he died of cancer while still pretty young. Grandma tried to rewrite the obituary and managed to annoy my uncle's wife and children for a very long time. Then my mum hated my brother's first wife. There were plenty of good reasons. She was an addict, a liar, and a cheater, among other things. My mother-in-law didn't hate me, but she didn't love me either. She resented me and wanted to be the only woman in my husband's life. It was obvious that she would have felt like that about anyone. And I didn't like my son's first girlfriend. She seemed very disinterested in everything but herself and her phone. I didn't know her well or for long, but struggled to see what he liked about her beyond her looks. She was pretty. I was with a woman I thought would be my wife. We talked about it, looked at rings. She was Catholic and I'm not. Her mum hated my guts because I wasn't Catholic. Her mum would send her emails monthly saying, "He isn't Catholic. He's not rich and never will be. Find yourself a rich Catholic boy so you don't have to work," etc., etc. The mum got to the point where she spread rumors to my ex's friends about me. So now the mum and a bunch of her friends don't like me. She left me in January. I've barely spoken to her. I got in touch with her the other day and told her how badly I want her back. Turns out she got herself a wealthy Catholic boyfriend now. 3 years of being with her and being broken up for 4 months. I still dream about her every night, and she moved on a few weeks after the split. Feels bad, man. I know why my mum doesn't like my sister-in-law. She's unpleasant and mean. Every time we went to visit, she'd make sure there was at least one fight. With my brother, at least one yelling, drag-out fight. So now, every time we're trying to enjoy a visit, it's tense because we're waiting for the inevitable. Watching my nephew watch his parents scream at each other is the worst. My brother went from doing okay, having friends and a sense of humor and some crap, to now being overweight, unhappy, and having nothing to do on the weekends but drink and watch TV, which he then picks a fight about. He's so wrapped up in it, even when I try to get him alone for a while, it takes him a while to unwind. Otherwise, he puts me down so that he doesn't feel awful. It sucks. I used to be best friends with my brother, and Ma knows it too and hates her as much as she can. Mainly it's a pity because it's clear she's a miserable person. I love my daughters-in-law now, but at one time my eldest was very serious and talking marriage with a girl that no one I knew liked except him. That girl was really arrogant with no particularly good reason for being so. She didn't appear to like anyone else either. She was just very bad-natured. I was upset for my son, but also relieved when she broke it off. He had hit a bad patch and was out of work, so she started seeing someone else. Fun story time, my coworker and I both have terrible mother-in-laws. We always complained to each other because we got it, and it's hard to talk to your husband about it because they clearly love their parent and their parent treats them well. One day she turns to me and says, "I know I'm going to hate my future daughter-in-law because no matter who she is or what she does, she'll never be good enough for my baby." So my response was, "So basically you want to be your mother-in-law." Her eyes got really big and she was horrified that she would act the way our mother-in-law would without even knowing who he was possibly ever going to meet. He was in middle school at the time and years away from being that serious with anyone. I'm pretty sure that's the mentality of my own mother-in-law. I have a relative who hates their daughter-in-law because she wouldn't allow her husband to donate his bone marrow to save his brother-in-law who had leukemia. Her logic being, "One of your sons is already screwed up, why would you potentially want to screw up the second one?" My mother-in-law sees me as competition. She doesn't like that she doesn't have control of her son anymore and that he's allowed to make his own decisions. I don't play her games or feed into her narcissism, and she hates everyone unless she can benefit from them. So there's that. I'm curious if anyone will come and write here as a mother who dislikes her daughter-in-law and admit it for anything other than, "I knew she was trash, she cheated and broke his heart" kind of dislike. You know, a situation where she was clearly validated in the end. My mother-in-law would dig a grave and bury herself in it before consciously admitting, even to herself, that she didn't like me, and makes sure I know it at every chance. There's just such a cognitive dissonance in the way she thinks of herself and the way she truly is, and I bet that's quite common. My mother-in-law never liked me much. She didn't hate me, but I'm pretty sure she thought her son was better than me. Plus, to her, if you aren't blood, you aren't family. She had pictures all over her house of her other kids, of my husband, but not one single picture of me. I spent 20 years trying to get her to like me, and then suddenly I just didn't care anymore. I was pleasant, helped out when needed, but I just didn't give a rat's butt. It made everything much easier. The thing I'm proudest of is that my kids have no idea. She's dead now, and I've never said a bad word about her to them. They loved her. But at her funeral, I was told to go in with the rest of her friends and well-wishers, and that I was excluded from the family-only part. Honestly, you win just for taking it with grace, and for being happy despite her preferential treatment. The funeral thing is a bit of a nasty final blow from beyond the grave, but I'd wager that people who saw that happen probably noticed and sympathized with you more afterwards. Victory through grace. Judging by other people's limited replies, I think I can offer something. However, it was a girlfriend of 2 years, not a wife, and she's an ex now, thankfully. They were 19 when they started dating. The biggest issue was a lack of maturity and low self-esteem. Typical young person control and jealousy stuff. It displayed itself in a list of behaviors, like slowly but surely starting disliking his friends and family, which led to many people being systematically removed from his life. Constant accusations of cheating when he was very devoted. He's a one-woman kind of guy. Sadly, she was a child in a woman's body. Pattern of the silly junior high romance with unwanted roughhousing, pinching, and tickling. This was done aggressively after being asked to stop. Expectations of him to join her repeatedly in activities she enjoyed but he disliked, while not willing to share in his interests. Then she'd quiz him on stuff to make sure he was paying attention and learning. Identifying tree species, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm walking in the woods when I don't want to. I forgot the names. Why does it matter? I'd rather be listening to records and playing board games." Which was an activity she hated because it included his friends, by the way. Also, her family had issues which she modeled, which included belittling his lifestyle and interests. Our family has issues too, but we all support one another's quirks and eccentricities. We don't require anyone to know our secret cuckoo handshake to join in on the circus. She'd use bedroom favors as a tool to distract him when he was wanting space from her. From what he said, she wasn't even that good at it. He's just my dumb little idiot. I love him, but my God. He was never allowed to do things on his own, or he'd get constant texts and calls, so he'd have to rush what he was doing, even if it was mowing his grandma's lawn. He couldn't even have lunch with me without having hell to pay for it later. She never complimented or appreciated him. Worked below part-time, as few hours as possible, and spent all of her money on girly stuff and expected him to pay all of the bills. She never did her half of the housework and whined when he was too tired or broke to take her out. Zero goals to improve herself, go to school, or look for a decent job. And she never wore makeup, like never, but started to at the end when she'd go out alone with her sister to bars. Never dressed up for him, like for real. Oh, and to be clear, the makeup isn't the issue here. The fact is, she was getting dolled up to go to the bars without him as their relationship was nearing the end, but never cared to doll herself up for him, ever, is the point. She collected pets and then neglected them, but expected him to take care of them. Also expected him to help her family with manual jobs around their houses. She had depression issues, and my whole family is a truckload of mental illnesses, so I don't mean the depression was a flaw of hers. However, even when given compassion and options to seek help, she refused to do anything about it. If someone's depressed enough to complain about it constantly, to the degree that it causes it in someone else around them, it's time to pop some happy pills or reconsider one's romantic suitability. There was a lot of subtle manipulation and goodness knows what other goofy crap she came up with at the time to play games or gauge his reactions. And for what it's worth, we as a family all gave a big effort to like her, get along with her, and treat her like family without judgment. We even paid for and took her on vacation with us. After they broke up and he was in his "screw that, I don't want a girlfriend" phase, he had tons of girls after him. He has a new girlfriend now. She isn't without her own issues, but she also has a lot of great qualities that more than make up for them. Nobody's perfect, especially my little man, but she makes him feel good about himself and she makes him laugh. She's a definite keeper. In short, his ex-girlfriend was a psycho witch. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mother hates my wife of 9 years and always has. My wife is half Hispanic and has a son from a previous marriage, had a father who was an ex-con, and my mother feels that my wife was taking me from her. I'm the only child who lived near them. She would go as far to invite me and my wife's daughter to do things and not my wife and stepson. My father wasn't much better either. Needless to say that I had to cut ties with my parents. I'm much happier since then. My mum was hesitant at first because, oh no, 2 men, how am I going to get grandbabies? Shh, Mum, it's okay. You have 2 more sons, more chances with my siblings, but also none of us owe you grandbabies. She also seems to struggle with her perception of my partner's intelligence and anxiety. On the other hand, my partner's mother constantly whines about how I lack a real job. I'm physically disabled and autistic, making most typical entry-level jobs hell, if not impossible. I do the budgeting and whatnot. My partner is dyscalculic and learning disabled, which ties into my mum's issue regarding smarts. We aren't on benefits, and I aren't as well. She knows all of this, but that's not good enough, of course. We work really, really well together for the record, almost a brains and brawn sort of deal. Our strengths and weaknesses suit each other nicely. My mum hated my wife, and I don't know why. My wife is beautiful, smart, kind, and has never done anything to my mum. I mean, frankly, my wife is way too good for me. She's always been nice and a great mum to her grandkids. I guess my mum has this way of making these kinds of backhanded comments. I never noticed it and kind of dismissed my wife about it for the first 5 years of our marriage. Then one day my mother admitted that she didn't like my wife and that was it. I haven't talked to my family in 2 years now, and it was the best decision I've ever made. Yep, this is why most of those mothers in these stories at least go to the effort of pretending to like their spouses, even if their faces and actions say otherwise. My mother-in-law is a fundamentalist Christian who pretends to like me, but I know that if I broke up with her son, she would be overjoyed. Over the past 10 years, she's said and done things to show her true colors. Myself and her ex-pastor son are atheists. His parents are relentless and creative in their tactics for us to return to the fold. She said some incredibly rude things about non-Christians. What she doesn't consider is this is one of the many reasons why we don't believe or participate. Okay, so I don't like fruit pies, big frickin' whoop. This became a huge deal to her. When we first started dating, she told my significant other that she's not like us. When he questioned her about it, she told him it was because I don't like pie. He basically rolled his eyes at her. Yeah, so for every birthday for 6 years, she'd bake me an apple pie. I'd politely choke down a piece and she'd stand smiling her frickin' face off and say, "Oh, right, you don't like pie. You shouldn't feel like you need to eat that for my benefit." My saving grace is that I'm a clean eater now, over 60 pounds down, and I don't eat sugar, meat, flour, stuff like that. This has created its own issue. I'm very appreciative when we're invited for a meal, even though I now have to bring my own food. She'll not stop putting marshmallows on the sweet potato, sugar in the peas, bacon fat in her salad dressing, heaps of butter and sour cream in the potatoes, and then complains to me that she can't seem to get to the same weight as me. She's got 30 plus years on me, and every time she sees me she asks my current weight, and when I tell her I don't know, she'll pout and grumble under her breath about it. Which, I work out every frickin' day and I basically just eat vegetables. This is not frickin' easy, and it's also not for anyone. I don't judge anyone for their weight, that's your crap to deal with. I have plenty of my own baggage I'm lugging around. She's actually grabbed my hips and jiggled me like a side of beef, trying to guess my weight. Don't get me wrong, I really do love and appreciate her and what she's done for us. I feel that she's made 0 attempts to get to know me. She basically knows where I work and where I live, and that's it. But she's never asked me about my life ever. She has no freaking clue that both my brothers are gay. Huh! My son should have chosen me. My mother-in-law hates me. She'll talk crap behind my back, but try to be nice as pie to my face. How do I know this? Because it's my husband she talks to. According to my mother-in-law, even though we all started out on council estates, because they bought their own home, I'm not the right class. Because I have a degree, I'm taking the mickey out of my husband's intelligence. Because I'm 7 years older than my husband, I've obviously brainwashed him into abandoning her. Because I don't make a ton of money, I'm a gold-digging harlot who only wants him for his money, despite him being depressed, jobless, and not wanting to be alive when I met him. And because I have tattoos, I've obviously got massive issues. My husband eventually got told that he should move back home with them, and as a sop, he could still be in a relationship with me. He told her that if she made me choose, she'd lose. She's been coldly civil to me since. So one of my sons got me to make an account quickly to give an actual perspective from a mother-in-law. For me, I don't like my other son's new wife because she's a lazy witch, to put it bluntly. They're both 26 now, and she doesn't lift a finger to help do any housework or laundry, and she seems to expect him to do everything for her, and it feels like he's a doormat to me in that respect, even though he probably doesn't see it that way. You go into their house and there'll be piles of dirty dishes just lying around unwashed, and it's disgusting. Relationships should mean shared responsibility, but she does not do her part. On top of that, it's like she treats our home like hers, and just makes herself at home around our pool and hot tub. She uses them more than we do, and we live here. The only good thing I have to say is she doesn't seem to be after him for money. We're a well-off family, and he's making more than 100K at 26, and should be making 500K by 35 or 40 at this rate. And she builds up more savings than he does, despite earning 4 times more. Honestly, I just wish she'd do more to help out. Even just offering would be nice, even if we don't need it, but as long as they're happy, I try to keep out of it. My mother doesn't like my brother's wife because said mother happens to be a narcissistic butthole who wanted him to pick her as the number one in his life. My mother-in-law hates my fiancé simply because he's a recovering smack addict. The fact that I'm one too seems to make no difference to her. What's more, his family is so lovely to me, and it makes me really sad that he can't have the same experiences with my family. I'll admit that it could be intimidating to know that your offspring is attached to someone going through a struggle like that, but hate, as always, is the wrong way, man. I can't understand dragging down someone who's actively fighting to come out the other side of addiction. Do your best to help them or be welcoming so that they thrive. My in-laws didn't like me at first because we're different races and speak different languages. They came around when they saw how happy their son was and when I started learning their language. It's been several years now and I can't speak their language, but I understand a lot, so we get along okay. I can answer this question from the other side. I'm a daughter whose mother doesn't really like my husband. His personality doesn't jive with hers, which I could see at first because he can be a bit tightly strung, where she's really laid back, but I guess she won't admit that her daughter is also tightly strung and we're a great match. In addition, he didn't go to college, his family isn't as solid as ours, and his upbringing isn't as good. We also eloped, not in the pregnant teenager sense of the word, but we didn't have a wedding, which she seems to blame him for, and that kind of seals the deal on her dislike of my husband and opinion of my marriage. She doesn't really ask about him, and when I mention him, her answers are curt and seem bothered. We don't currently live in my home state, which I'm hoping to change very soon. As long as she doesn't make her unwarranted opinions known and is able on some level to fake it, we'll be fine. It's not ideal, but it's likely how it'll be. Her mind is made up about him, and the things she said about him or us before we married aren't things I'll ever fully heal from. She has a way, however, of subtly saying things without saying things, and if that's been going on with my family, we'll have to address it. My stepmother-in-law hates me because we have the same first, middle, and last names. My real mother-in-law died, but I felt like she was the only one to try to understand me. What's your "'tis but a scratch" moment, and how bad was your injury, really? I got hit by a car my freshman year of high school. I went flying, lost consciousness for a split second when I hit the ground, thank God for the helmet. When I came to, people were all around me asking if I was okay and what had happened. I was like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm just gonna get back on my bike and go now. But I didn't really move. Then people started asking me to call an ambulance and my mum. I was like, why? I'm good. I even told my mum on the phone I was still going to bike home. But as I was saying that, the people around me had started to move one of my legs, and I watched as my foot proceeded to not move. I had broken both bones in my leg completely in half and part of my ankle. Just pure adrenaline and shock. I also vividly remember thinking, is this what it feels like to get hit by a car? Also, the leg wasn't setting right, probably from movement, and the doctor decided to put me on laughing gas as he tried to crack my bones back into place. I was in a stupor laughing as I felt my bones grind. I'm a bartender in a nightclub. One night while I was working, I was pouring a drink while I reached back with my other hand to open a fridge, and that's when I heard a pop and got a huge pain in my back and shoulder area. The pain was pretty bad, but I was sure it was a pulled muscle and there wouldn't be much point in seeing a doctor other than getting meds. So I waited. I fought through the pain, which was so bad at times it was making it hard to breathe. That was Friday. I called off my shift on Saturday and had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday off before I went back to work Wednesday. Once I biked into work. All in all, I waited 9 days total before finally deciding to go to the ER. I had a collapsed lung, called a spontaneous pneumothorax. 20 minutes after getting to the ER, I was put into emergency surgery. I was essentially breathing with only one lung, and any major impact to my chest would have collapsed the other one and probably killed me. That happened to me when I was in school just 3 months ago. I suddenly started not being able to breathe, but I was like, I'm sure it's nothing. When I got home, I actually slept for 3 hours, but I woke up from the pain. Me and my family thought it was corona, so we went to the hospital. I was quite shocked to learn that I had a collapsed lung. But the worst part wasn't the lung, it was the operation and the aftermath. Having a tube inside you for a week hurts like hell. Haven't slept for 5 days during my stay there. I got hit by a car while riding my bicycle, flew through the air, bounced off his windshield, breaking his windshield, my helmet, and 2 vertebrae. Then I lay on the ground where my kneecap shattered and bone was sticking out of the skin. As I lay there in shock, unaware of how badly I was injured, I thought, I might be able to get on my bike and ride home. Oof. Were you thinking this because you were delusional, or were you just uninsured in the US? But yeah, car crashes are weird. You don't normally hurt for the first few minutes afterwards. I guess the body just can't contemplate being hit by 1 ton of metal. Rolled my car, got out of the car bewildered and in shock, noticing a kink in my neck. As someone who constantly cracks my knuckles, back and neck, my first instinct was, I'm not hurt. Thank God, I just need to crack my neck and I'll be fine. Luckily, before I finished processing that train of thought, I was held down in C-spine by the person behind me who'd watched my crash. Luckily, he was an off-duty firefighter. I'd broken 3 vertebrae in my neck. I just couldn't tell it yet from the adrenaline and shock. Required full surgery to fuse together with bone from my hip and plates and screws. Had there not been someone behind me and had I proceeded with my "'tis but a scratch" instincts, I'd be paralyzed or dead. A couple of weeks ago, I stepped on an anthill and got a bunch of ant bites on my ankles. 3 to 4 days later, the itching was unbearable. I wasn't sleeping, my legs were swollen, and no amount of Benadryl or antihistamine cream was helping the itching. I finally went to a clinic to get a shot or whatever, because I was clearly having some sort of allergic reaction. It was a staph infection that had spread from my ankles up to my knees. I would have died if this was 1920 instead of 2020. I was on antibiotics for 10 days, and now several weeks later the dead skin from the infection is still flaking off. In short, scratched ant bites with unclean hands and gave myself a staph infection. Ignored it for several days because it was just some bug bites. My little sister fell down 15 steps at our grandma's house when she was a toddler, got up, giggled, and went to go eat some snacks. This other time, when she was still a toddler, she was supposed to be napping. We were in the living room and just heard a huge thud. We ran to the room thinking she'd fallen out of bed. Nope, she had somehow managed to pull the TV down, and it fell on top of her. This was the early 2000s. TVs were huge and heavy as frick. She was laying there in the snow angel position, and my mum freaked out. When we got the TV off her, she got up and asked for ice. Not to soothe the pain, but to eat. My little sister was and still is a champ. Back in my baseball days, when I was pitching, I completely lost a pitch, and it beamed a guy in the jaw. He threw his bat down, glared at me with the glariest of glares ever glared, spat out blood, and then calmly ran to first base as though nothing had happened. It was terrifyingly badass. I was mountain biking and fell off. I fell down a part of the mountain and onto a road where I almost got hit by a car. I got up quickly, thanked the driver for not killing me, and then got back on that bike. I knew the road would meet up with the trail I was on, so I could meet up with my group who hadn't seen me fall. When I got to them, one of them looked at me and was like, "What happened?" I got off the bike, walked over whilst we waited for the others to catch up, and just said I fell off. He then looked at me and was like, "What the hell happened?" I'm like, "It's nothing. A few cuts and scratches on my hands and arms. My leg was bleeding from earlier, but that was it." Then I looked down and realized I'd scratched off half the skin on my leg from falling on the road. Basically, it was a bad case of road burn. From all the adrenaline, I hadn't even felt it. They called someone to come and get me from the mountains. I wasn't allowed to continue, and one of the other riders saw my leg and decided they wanted to stop too. I just went to the pharmacy, grabbed some wipes and bandages, then we got a drink while we waited for everyone else to finish. I broke my arm at the skating rink and skated for an hour before I even left. Then, after I left there, I went to a playground with my boyfriend at the time and hung out. I didn't go to the hospital until the next day. A few years ago, I was sick. It wasn't fun, but it was only a bug. I'd be okay in a couple of days max. I started to get an unusual pain in my abdomen as the day wore on, but to me it was just a side effect of all the throwing up I'd been doing. I spent the night in the spare room for 2 reasons. 1, because I was so frickin' hot, and 2, so that in case I needed to get up, I didn't disturb my partner, who'd be getting up early for work. I managed to get an okay night of sleep, with the vomiting having stopped, but I still felt like crap. When my partner came to see me before he went to work, he asked how I was. I still felt terrible, but it was a tummy bug. I wasn't going to be instantly better. That sharp pain was still there, though. On hearing that I was still in pain, he insisted on taking me to the hospital. I didn't think it was all necessary, but I was too exhausted to argue. When we got to the hospital, I made damn sure the person at the front desk knew I thought this was a waste of time. After a lot of prodding and questions about if I was pregnant, it turned out my appendix was in the process of rupturing. I got blackout drunk while camping and fell hands first onto the grate that had been over the fire for hours. My wife and friends were all freaking out, thinking I definitely had third-degree burns. I came out of my blackout in the bathroom with all of them trying to wash my hands in cold water. When all the soot came off, I was somehow completely unharmed. Since then, I've been known as the Unburned. I'd like to thank this Targaryen for writing into the channel. I'm sorry that your family haven't been in a good episode of TV since Season 4 of Game of Thrones. I broke my toe running up the stairs, and I ran back down the stair thinking I'd just stubbed it until my toe then turned purple. A couple of years ago, my mate broke my nose in class, and the teacher told me to be quiet. My first job was as a butcher, and I came into work one day with a raging hangover. I sharpened the knives, they were the crap ones that went blunt all the time, and then I immediately proceeded to cut my finger open. I thought nothing of it, went about my shift, and when I got home I put a proper dressing on it. I found out it was as deep as the bone, and I wouldn't get feeling back in the end of it for literally years. When I was very young, I pulled a tablecloth and managed to dump a freshly boiled pot of tea all over myself. I got rushed to the hospital. My skin was red and bubbling. I should have been in floods of tears. Instead, I proudly pointed to my ruined skin and proclaimed to the paramedic that I did that. Over 30 years later, and I still have some scars, but I'm definitely no longer that hardcore. My teacher said that one time she was in college and she was in a classroom and her foot was stuck on something, so she just yanked it back and was fine, but she was looking up the whole time. Then she got back to her dorm and took off her shoe. It was soaked in blood and her foot was stabbed by a loose piece of metal. When I was a small idiot child, I had a habit of gripping door frames when walking through the door. I did not discriminate between the latch side or the hinge side. Door got closed and my fingers got crushed in the hinge, to the point where there's dark purple lines across them and a tangible groove. My mum started completely freaking out over the injury, but I, the brave little idiot that I was, saw the distress that she was in at what had happened, put on my bravest face, with my eyes welling up in tears from the pain, and said, "Don't worry, Mummy, it'll heal." I was right, it did, but still. I broke my wrist while snowboarding, stuffed some snow in my glove and did a couple more runs. I walked under a pine tree barefoot and stepped on something that mildly hurt. Went back inside and I was cleaning my bathroom, then I looked in the mirror and saw whole bloody footprints covering the floor behind me in a line down the hall. For a minute I thought I was being haunted or something. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was making a ninja mask. I had a piece of cloth and I was trying to cut the eye holes out of it using a small steak knife. No, it wasn't on my face, I wasn't quite that stupid. But I was holding the cloth and cutting with the knife, then the knife slipped and went straight into my pinky finger. I had to actually pull the knife out. It went right beside my joint and stabbed through the flesh on my pinky. I pulled the knife out and blood was just pouring out of me, which was weird to me at the time. I didn't realize a pinky would bleed that much. The worst part is, I was home alone. It didn't really hurt that badly, strange as it may seem. It was honestly no worse than a regular cut, pain-wise. Anyway, the blood was coming out at a rate that I'd never seen before, so I went to the bathroom and wrapped like 7 band-aids around it, and then took some masking tape and wrapped that around all the band-aids. I was like, surely that will stop the bleeding. I said, frick the ninja mask and just sat on my couch watching TV for a bit. Then I noticed the tape was starting to slide off. I'd bled through everything and all the band-aids in maybe 5 minutes max. So I got some paper towels and decided to hold pressure on it, but the cut wasn't very symmetrical. I couldn't figure out how to get the skin back together. I did the best I could and bled through a bunch of paper towels, and finally I was like, screw it, I'm gonna have to call 911. So, I called 911, they came out, and by the time they got there, I was feeling rather weak. There was blood all over my sinks, the bathroom and kitchen one, and some on the floor. They transported me to the hospital and gave me stitches. Healed up as good as new in a couple of weeks. The doctor said I was lucky I didn't sever any tendons. My mum came to the ER to take me home. It was kind of an awkward ride. She whined at me some for being too old to be doing this kind of crap. The kicker is, yeah, I really was too old to be having accidents like that. You're probably picturing a 10 or 11-year-old. Yeah, nah, I was 19. Separated 2 ribs when I slipped going up a staircase. I went down to radiology at work and got an x-ray, looked at it and said, okay, no breaks. I just walked over to the ER and got 2 big rolls of ACE bandages. Went back to my desk and took off my shirt and t-shirt. My boss walks in, sees the bruises on my chest. Then I said, no biggie, just don't make me laugh. I told him what had happened, wrapped myself up and went on with my life. When I was a teenager, I got jumped by a hoodlum trying to mug me. I was just walking along and they snuck up behind me and cracked me in the spine with an iron bar. Somehow, the blow, instead of being painful, just went completely numb. So I turned and said, what the frick was that? I'll never forget the look of fear on the guy's face. He just dropped the bar and ran. I still get a weird numb spot on my back from time to time. This is definitely the closest we've actually come to the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail thus far. I'd guess if you've psyched yourself up enough to brain and potentially kill someone, you're already pretty freaked out. Then seeing them walk it off like that would set off all kinds of panic. I absolutely shattered my wrist, pulverized a couple of carpals into dust, fractured my scaphoid bone and flipped it 180 degrees, then spent 2 days trying to convince myself it was but a simple strain. When I finally went to the doctor, they rushed me into emergency surgery. Later found out the doctors couldn't believe I wasn't incapacitated by pain. Whoops! I was a kid visiting family in West Virginia and was playing with some other kids which somehow involved me being in a tree. I got a little cut on my hand and was inconsolable. Ran to the house for my mum to make it better. She put the tiniest of band-aids on it. When I turned around and started walking out of the house, she started yelling and I just looked at her like, what? There was a trail of blood coming from the back of my leg. I hadn't even noticed that. I actually got stabbed one time in my lower thigh. Walked to the hospital with my coat covering it because I didn't want to freak out any kids. All thanks to the wonderful thing called alcohol. Stung like a witch for the next day though. When I was younger, like really young, I'd escaped from the house and at the time my dad was just about to drive to work. I'd managed to get just behind the wheel of the car and got run over. Then I was rushed to the hospital and at around midnight my parents got a call from the hospital because I was running around the place like a lunatic, waking up all the other kids, and basically I got away with a car tire mark and that was it. In short, I was a super baby who got run over and didn't break a single thing. Fell off my bike and onto some wet gravel when I was 8. No big deal, scraped my knee and got soaked. Played the rest of the day outside and then came home for dinner. I went to the bathroom and when I pulled my jeans off, I realized I wasn't soaked from the puddle. It was blood. I'd sliced a huge gash in my knee and when I pulled my pants down, a flap of skin pulled away and it started bleeding again. My first stitches. I broke my tailbone and didn't know for 6 months, then found out when I got an x-ray. I've always had moderate back pain, but I also have a high pain tolerance. It's the only bone I've ever broken. I ran into the top of a door frame. I did the whole cartoon, head outside, legs flying inside, and then falling on my back thing. My head hurt a tiny bit, so I covered my forehead with my hand with some pressure for a minute. When I removed my hand and tried to get up, my friends who were crowded over me collectively gasped. Turned out I'd split my forehead open and you could see the bone. I literally wouldn't have known if they hadn't been so freaked out. I couldn't feel a thing. Got 5 stitches and a small scar near my hairline. When I fell through a window and cut my stomach open, my colon and stomach both fell out of my body while I caught, and then looked up at my friends bleeding out. Was in shock, but alas, 'tis but a scratch, and I'm still here today. A slab of glass shattered and fell on me and my mum. I checked my mum for any injuries and went to clean up the mess, which was promptly followed by my mother screaming and flipping out. Apparently I'd left a trail of blood around the house because the glass left a deep gash on my foot. She even scolded me because I was laughing at the whole situation. Fun times. When I was in elementary school, we used to play this game at recess where we'd try and see how many people we could fit in the tube slide without the person at the bottom falling out. When it came my turn to be the person at the bottom, I thought I was being smart by bracing my hands against the wall of the slide. The next kid came sliding down and his foot hit the perfect spot on my hand and dislocated my thumb at the second joint. The other kids were laughing that I could only hold one kid in when I held my hand up and smiled and said, "But watch how fast I can make my thumb grow." and pulled it back into place with a loud pop. One of the kids got freaked out and told on me, and I got sent home for the day, but I felt like the coolest fourth grader there ever was for not freaking out when my bone wasn't where it should have been. I got into a car accident and then showed up to practice an hour or so later. One of my students, I'd impressed upon them that there would be no late work unless hooked up to tubes in the hospital. It was their research paper final in the pre-digital submission days. There was a college freshman who'd been given a ridiculously fast car by parents who'd also chosen a ridiculous acid green color. His car stood out. Another kid in the class on his way to class said he saw the ridiculous car smashed and an ambulance at the side of the road. He stopped and approached. The child owner of that ridiculous car was being loaded into an ambulance on a stretcher and sees the other student. Then yells, "My research paper! Front seat! Get it to her!" This Good Samaritan did so and submitted the blood-smudged, bedraggled document. The guy comes to pick it up a week and a half later, in a wheelchair because he broke one leg, sprained the other ankle, and also sprained a wrist. He's been for 20 years my gold standard of handing in your paper. I have to know if he passed that paper. Honestly, getting back a paper covered in viscera that a teacher has also written grades on would just be such a unique thing. That would go on my wall. It would be even funnier if after all it took to get it there, it was an F. A field arrow went through part of my thumb. Lucky you didn't get it in the knee, then you'd no longer be an adventurer. When I was 6, I badly bruised my arm when performing cartwheels and backflips, and at first when I fell it was no big deal until my arm was swollen and I couldn't bend it. I had to wear a cast for a few weeks. When I was a child, I was pretty stupid, so I was playing Don't Let the Paper Touch the Ground. It's where you just keep hitting a piece of paper in the air, and then I ran into my kitchen while playing and smashed my head on the corner of a table, and it was gushing blood. I didn't even notice my head cut open right in the middle of my eyes. I'm very lucky I still have vision apparently. I only realized my head was cut open when my sister looked at me and just started screaming her vocal cords out. Well, I was playing football, or what you Yanks call soccer, and then I twisted my ankle. I had to stop, but managed to walk to the coach to get home. Walked from the coach stop to my house, which was about 1.5 miles, and then went to sleep. I woke up the next day and my ankle was the size of a grapefruit and I had to call an ambulance due to quite severe pain. The medical examiner assumed my ankle was crushed by a very heavy object as I'd fractured 5 bones, broken my leg, and had extensive cartilage and ligament damage. I've been told now that I'll never heal to 100% again. 3 years later and I still have pain and my foot goes numb all the time. And this happened 2 weeks after when my first cast was removed. I had a piece of an air chisel break off, about the size of a BB, and then insert itself into my hand. I had thick latex gloves on. I thought it just hit me and bounced off. It wasn't until I realized my hand was really wet and my glove was sloshing that I noticed it was full of blood. What's the cruelest prank you've ever seen that went way too far? 20 years ago, a friend of mine was prank kidnapped on Halloween, driven to a cornfield and left tied up and blindfolded for an hour. It wasn't funny. The friends that did this to him actually got some time in prison. It was just a regular kidnapping. One of the guys on my high school track team was pantsed directly in front of the girls from the other team. He wasn't wearing underwear. The person who pantsed him was one of his close friends. Yeah, that happened to me when I was a kid. I had enough friends and self-esteem that I wasn't too devastated, and the girls were all really sweet, like, oh, we didn't really see what happened. But I still never talked to that friend ever again, and I was a bit traumatized for a while. Not so much a prank, but in high school there was a girl who was on the spectrum, and she was showing off a dance, and these cheerleaders were clearly laughing at her. The thing is that girl didn't realize they were making fun of her. They told her to do it again just so that they could laugh more. I was 14 and going out to eat with my first girlfriend and my mum at Gym Boys. Just like 90% of 14-year-old males, I suffered from acne pretty badly. We were eating and having a good time, and out of nowhere my mum looks to my girlfriend and asks, "Do you like popping bumps?" My eyes widened. She knew I was horrified by her question. My girlfriend just got quiet and her face went red. My mum then proceeded to say, "What? It's not like she can't see them, and you need someone to do something about them." Then laughed and then got mad that no one else thought it was funny and ruined the rest of the evening. I could never understand doing something like that to my child. There was that YouTube family that was like Daddy of 5 or something, where one of the kids was literally just ridiculed for the entertainment of strangers constantly. They'd do horrible stuff to this boy and then say it was a prank for the channel, and he'd be absolutely destroyed and scream that he hated YouTube. Anything done as a prank for YouTube? I mean, it's almost as bad as just child mistreatment pranking for YouTube. The channel was called Daddy of 5, I think. Thankfully, the boy and his sister were taken from that horrific family and have found a better home. As these suggestions often do, this one sent the narrator on a Google search binge, and my god, these parents on this channel ended up under supervised probation after they took a plea deal, and rightfully so. They treated their kids downright awfully. I have no idea what radio station this was on, as I was only a kid, but they used to do prank phone calls. I have little to no recollection of many of them except this one, because even as a kid I could tell it was just wrong. The radio host rang up a woman and advised that he was the manager of her husband's company, and he was very sorry to tell her that he had been involved in an accident with some heavy machinery and it had resulted in his death. As you would expect, the woman was beside herself with being told her husband had just died. She was wailing on the phone, and the radio host couldn't really get another word in to explain that it was a joke, and then they just cut off the phone call and played a song. Even as a kid, I knew it was a really stupid and cruel thing to do, and I'm pretty sure that was the last time they did a prank phone call on that channel. I remember back a few years ago, it was all over the news here in the UK that a nurse self-deleted after falling for a prank call from an Australian radio station. The TV show WB Superstar from the early 2000s. It was a show like American Idol, but they were actually looking for the worst singers. But they told the contestants they were looking for the best singers until the very end of the competition, when they revealed the truth to the winner after their final performance in front of a live audience. It was a very cruel show. A girl wrote an elaborate love letter pretending to be another girl in class and handed it to me. I was shocked to receive my first love letter and felt like garbage when I found out it was fake. I remember when the ALS challenge was popular. I read an article about a prank played on a high schooler. These kids told him it was just water in the bucket, but it was also pee, cigarette butts, all sorts of disgusting stuff. Then they put the video all over the internet as though the bucket wasn't enough. That girl who hid her boyfriend's wheelchair on YouTube. That crap wasn't funny. At my high school, 100 years ago back in the 80s, some football players talked a special education kid into continually sneaking over and grabbing a girl's butt right in the middle of the main area during lunchtime with tons of people around. This kid was really well liked at the school, and it was perfectly obvious that he was only doing it because they were being nice to him. Luckily, the girl who was the victim talked to him really calmly and explained to him it wasn't something nice to do, and that the kids who seemed nice were actually being mean to him. If I recall, the kid's teacher wanted him to go back to eating lunch in his class, but lots of students talked her down, and there was never another incident. He was still well liked. The girl who was pranked was a really popular and successful student, and while I didn't know her, because she was a couple of years ahead of me, I knew enough about her to say with confidence that she had a great career ahead of her. Don't think anything happened to the football players. The story has stuck with me because, 1, the cruelty of the prank, based on manipulating a kid not able to understand he was being used, and 2, the poise and maturity of the girl who didn't get angry with the kid, even though it happened to her in front of half the school. A friend of a friend in high school had her boyfriend pretend that he had died. He had one of his friends call her saying he had died in a car accident, and had someone else calling up pretending to be a doctor from the hospital. She was hysterical. Later that day, after she kept asking the fake doctor which hospital it was so she could be there, she found out it was all a prank, bro, to see if she cared. Horrible. Anyway, they broke up. To this day, it's the nastiest prank I've seen in person. A group of 5 boys decided to throw rocks from an overpass at the cars below. One of the rocks ended up going through the car's windshield and killed the driver. The boys got charged with second-degree murder. Darren Brown, the English illusionist, did a TV show some years back. Long story short, he convinced a young lad who'd got really drunk the night before that he'd killed a girl. They set him up so badly. Psychologically, it looked like they'd broken this kid's soul, to the point where everything they'd set up, like the actors, the fake police, it made the lad so convinced he'd killed someone that he handed himself into the fake police station and admitted to a murder. I'll never forget the one tear trickling down this kid's face in the devastation at what he thought he'd done. Then bloody Darren Brown appears from behind a screen like, surprise! It was freaking cruel, and it stuck with me for a long time. I was once pranked by someone, a classmate probably, and they told me they were going to kill my best friend who was in the same class as me. It was really frickin' weird. The school never figured out who it was, they just asked my friend if he had any enemies. It was like, bro, we're 11. I remember seeing a video where they switched the pregnancy test to a fake positive one on their friend struggling with infertility. That is so messed up. My dad told me that when he was a kid, a friend of his gave him a glass of lemonade. It was Drano mixed with something else, and my dad vomited for hours. Thankfully, he survived and went on to have kids, but his vocal cords were never the same. It's truly insane how many of these so-called pranks are just straight-up crimes. I mean, this is some form of assault, right? Someone poisoned your dad and did lasting damage. Oh, I'll never forget it. A buddy and I were on a double date of sorts, though I was mainly winging it for him. The girl I was with, let's call her Kay, shared a heartbreaking story she thought was absolutely hilarious. In high school, Kay and her fellow cheerleaders invited the most ostracized girl in their class to a party as a joke. Said girl was overjoyed and couldn't believe it. She was dirt poor though. She ended up buying a new pair of overpriced jeans for the party, and it was obvious. She showed up with some of the tags still on them because she'll have to return them the next day. The cheerleaders notice and begin to plot. The four of us are sitting at dinner as Kay continues to relate what happened, laughing in fits the whole time. Someone spilled an entire glass of red wine on a love seat at the party. Kay immediately sits down opposite the spill and beckons the poor girl to sit down next to her to chat. The girl does so and immediately ruins the overpriced jeans. Everyone laughs as she runs out the door in tears. Kay casually finished the story as a sizable lump formed in my throat. Sometimes it's the small, sharp cruelties that cut the deepest. A friend of mine faked her self-deletion to get back at her boyfriend for April Fool's Day. I'd helped her without knowing she was going that far. Her boyfriend had claimed she had been sleeping around and dumped her when she told him she was pregnant. You know what? I don't miss living in dorms and I don't miss either of them. Prank war going on between two houses that were next to each other in San Diego, California, circa 2014. My cousin lived in one of the houses, and this happened when I went to visit him a few years back. House number 1 pulled a prank that led to a member of house number 2 being late for his first day of work. It was collateral damage, but the guy ended up getting fired for it. The guy who lost his job came home furious. He then took a 15-pound medicine ball and painted it to look just like a soccer ball. He tossed the medicine ball into the front yard of house 1 and waited. When he saw the guy come out of the house, he yells, "Hey Josh, can you kick that ball back over here?" The guy proceeds to make a running start and square up and kick the, quote, soccer ball with every ounce of strength he had. Poor guy went down almost immediately in tears and screaming. He broke 3 bones in his right foot. Just brutal. In 6th grade, I opened my locker and I found a note from a boy that I had a crush on falling out saying he liked me too. A bunch of girls in my grade were there when I found it and were super happy for me, or so I thought. When I went to the boy to ask him about it, he said he didn't write it, and a group of girls who were there when I found the note had written it. I turned around and sure enough, they were laughing. But it crushed me. Not that the boy didn't like me back, but because I didn't think these girls I'd gone to school with since 1st grade were that mean. A couple of weeks later, the group played a similar joke on one of the girls who was actually in on the prank against me, and I got a genuine apology from her after she realized how bad I must have felt. None of the other girls ever apologized. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a kid, somehow my classmates found it funny to wee in other people's cans of soda. I did not have a good childhood. When I was in elementary school, some boy came back from the restroom, said he couldn't wash his hands because there was pee in the soap dispenser. Somehow a kid had gotten it open, peed in it, and put it back in the dispenser. Someone asked a guy to be her boyfriend. She said yes, and the next day she invited all of her friends to tell him that she did it as a joke. This happened to me. I got the courage to ask her out in junior high, and she said yes. I took her to a movie and asked her if she wanted to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and again, she said yes. She carried on like we were dating, saying things like, "I'm so happy we're finally together." The girl would walk around holding my hand in school, and I was in heaven. I couldn't have been happier at that moment in my life because I was dating my dream girl. All the popular guys would snicker when we walked by, but I didn't care because I was just too happy. A week or so went by and she was laughing when she said it was just a joke. I've never been so devastated. Just to update on what happened down the road, years later, karma caught up to my then-fake girlfriend. She got really into smack and skanked out a bit. She did end up pulling it together, but not until she was well outside the popular pool. As for me, I did have trust issues for quite some time, even through college. But now I'm very happily married to a wonderful woman who's never treated me wrong, and I couldn't be happier. For all of you who've posted similar issues, I guess we share a hard lesson in life. People can be crappy, but in the long run, they just turn into good internet fodder. Keep your heads up. I just got pregnant. Aren't you happy for me? This was said on April 1st in front of a woman who had just lost a baby a month before. I saw a guy tip over the porta potty with someone in it. That memory was clear. I think it was his girlfriend. Oh yeah, I think I've seen something like this too. A guy was tripped over in a porta potty by some rando looking for a laugh. The guy gets out covered in that blue gunk and other nasty stuff, absolutely fuming, and proceeded to beat the prankster within inches of his life with a brick. He got some jail time and the other guy was hospitalized. I don't think bludgeoning your prankster is right, but I can definitely say I understand why he did it. Yeah, I mean, I agree with this sentiment. If you do this to someone, you accept that there's going to be a justifiable degree of ill will aimed your way, and you do not know how they're going to react. But this is about one of the worst things you can do to someone without physically damaging or emotionally traumatizing them, so it's going to be at the far end of their capability. The first time I met my brother's new girlfriend, she pulled me aside and started crying. She told me that she was pregnant, but my brother wasn't ready to tell anyone. She asked me to check up on him because he was really nervous. A couple of days went by and I texted her to see how she was doing and if my brother was doing okay and if they needed anything. She asked me what I was talking about. I said the baby. She replied, "Oh, you believed me. I was only joking, I'm not pregnant. I can't believe you fell for that." This wasn't some teenager either, she was 30. And yes, I told my brother. Yes, he still ended up marrying her, and almost 10 years later, I still refused to trust her. A group of girls at my high school told another girl that they were hanging out at one of their houses at 9 near a train station, but they really just made up a time and place that would make her stranded at the last train stop with no more trains home. In the spirit of cruel revenge, she should have just gotten her mom to call each of those girls and say, "Josie didn't come home today. She said she was meeting with you. Do you know anything?" In high school, one of the cutest girls in my grade came up to me and told me she had a crush on me and wanted to go out on a date. I was skeptical because no one had ever asked me out before, but I was growing into my body pretty well and was definitely more attractive than I was as an early teen, so I just figured puberty was doing some good work for me. We were 16 and 17 and had both just got our licenses, so she said she'd meet me at the movie theater and we'd go have dinner after the movie. I told my mum and she got all excited and helped me pick out an outfit and took pictures of me before my first ever date. Cringe as frick, but you know how it goes. I went and got my hair cut and my car detailed so I'd be rolling in fresh, you know? And believe me, I was looking tasty. Fresh shave, hair edged up, sharp enough to cut glass. I was dripped out before the phrase even existed. So I showed up at the theater a couple of minutes early and I was waiting for her, and after like 15 minutes I was thinking maybe I'll call her to make sure she didn't have an emergency come up or something. We didn't have texting back then, you see. So I call her and she answers on speakerphone and like 5 other girls are all laughing at me saying things like, "Haha, he actually showed up." So yeah, it was all just a prank to hurt my feelings. Joke's on me, I guess. My so-called friends had my mum drop me off at the mall and we hung out until near my bedtime. Mind you, this was back when there were pagers, and for the generation that grew up with smartphones, back before cell phones were something everyone used, there used to be the pager. So, I asked my friends when we were going back home because my mum had talked to their mothers about someone dropping me off home. My parents both worked. Anyways, they decided to tell me that their mum will pick them up from this door and I should just go ahead of them. They left, and I was a 12-year-old lost kid in the mall with no parent. Luckily, one of the male school bullies saw me and was like, "Oi, nerd, what are you doing late?" And I just broke down crying. The kid just dropped the bullying and went, "Oi, oi, oi, what happened?" And according to my parents, I just blabbered everything and he told me to wait until he found a phone and paged my dad while calling his mum and telling her what happened. Needless to say, they got a frantic father going, "What the crap has happened?" And the girls said they told their mum that I saw my uncle and left with him. But to be honest, me and the bully became best of friends after that. My brother gave my phone number to some rando who proceeded to call me at all hours and threatened to commit the unspeakable act against me. Quality guys. In college, at the end of the year, a club I was in had a roast of the outgoing seniors. My friend running the roast couldn't come up with anything for one of the guys, who we'll call Ben. To drum up ideas, he called a bunch of Ben's close friends, also in the club, and asked them for things to make fun of Ben about. Thinking that this was a confidential conversation, they proceeded to absolutely lay into Ben. Oh, that guy's seriously lame. Honestly, when I'm talking to a girl and he's there, it's supremely awkward. My friend simply recorded that whole conversation and played it outright for Ben's section of the roast, mortifying Ben and all of his friends simultaneously. In high school, someone made a pipe bomb and sneakily threw it into a metal trash can. One of my friends unknowingly walked by it when it exploded and blew out his eardrum. The trash can looked like a peeled banana afterwards. That person was ratted out and expelled. Killing a farmer's cow was some sick joke. The cow was not a meat cow either. It was the farmer's beloved pet, and he pet and fed it and played with the friendly cow each and every day. The kids forced the old bull to walk upstairs. Cows can walk upstairs, but their anatomy is not built for it, and it's extremely painful for them to do so. The old bull broke its front leg and bellowed in pain for 10 minutes. The farmer had no choice but to shoot it and kill his pet that he's had for the last 8 years right then and there on the stairs. The kids pled not guilty in court, but they were forced to pay for all of it. The bull was a Texas Longhorn, common in some areas but rare where we both lived. It was really sad to see the bull gone from the farm. I was neighbors with the farmer and he'd always invite me over to play with the animals and feed them and everything. The farmer sued the kids who killed the cow and won $70,000 and $20,000 for emotional upset. Stay winning, kings. The cow was an old bull. It was the most friendly cow I've ever seen. It wasn't even neutered, and it had really big horns and loved sitting next to the farmer and just grazing next to him. Oh, the thing here is that it's either a prank that goes too far, or if the bull had successfully gone up the stairs and didn't break its leg, what sort of prank was that? Just animal cruelty? What were these kids thinking? I mean, god damn it. The LeBrant family vloggers told their 5-year-old stepdaughter a few years ago that they were going to have to get rid of their dog because it wasn't behaving well around the baby as an April Fool's joke and posted it on YouTube. A friend of mine had a crush on his coworker. It was sort of an open secret. His manager tried to help him, offered advice, some things to say, small gifts she might be into, stuff like that. What no one knew at the time was that said manager and said coworker had recently started dating and hadn't told anyone yet. So he meant it as a prank on his new girlfriend, to be put into these awkward situations, but my friend's feelings were really hurt when it all came out. My ex-friend thought it was a really funny prank to kill my brother's hamster and tie it up and dress it in ridiculous ways. Any prank involving pretending to ask someone out on a date that I witnessed in my youth group. It was pretty common, everyone had it happen at least once, and it happened to me twice, but both times I found the guy repulsive and told them so. It happened to me. It was at my first school dance in middle school. I was always the shy kid, so I was surprised when one of the popular chicks came to me to ask me to dance. I said no because I was shy, but I was elated that I got asked. A few minutes later, I was in the bathroom stall, and a few kids came in and started talking about how they paid her $10 to ask me, and if I said yes, she would have just tripped me and made me look dumb. I never went to another dance all throughout middle and high school, even prom. What beautiful, weird hobbies are dying in the modern world. This might be a bit controversial, but since I do this, I'll mention it because that's how I feel. Playing drums. Real drums. MIDI are making us obsolete. Don't get me wrong, there are still applications for live drums, especially if you want the groove or feel of a live drummer, but bedroom music production has just skyrocketed even more due to the pandemic, and not everyone has enough space for a full acoustic kit. Ham radio. I remember as a kid listening to my dad's radio and him always having a good time and genuinely enjoying a good rag chew. I got my license and tuned into some of the local repeaters. I found some nets with the most depressive things I've ever heard. People talking about their terminal illnesses or how prescription costs are killing them. I'm a coin collector and it is dying. My grandpa collected coins. He always told my brother and I that, "Someday this will all be yours. There's $80,000 worth of coins in there." Well, what a nightmare that was after he died. We learned Grandpa had been buying reproduction coins, repackaging them as collectible or authentic, rare, and then selling them back in the numismatic news for a profit. So anyone who had come to appraise the collection just wouldn't touch it. We finally got all of the counterfeit bullcrap out and the legit collectibles separated. and there were less than 10 grand worth of those. And even worse, my mother decided we had to share it with my cousins and aunt and uncle, even though the collection was promised to my brother and I as the first grandkids. So we got 1 grand apiece. Stamp collecting. It used to be a huge thing, but not anymore. Probably because of the rise of email. Very few people send letters anymore. They have them at estate sales all the time for super cheap. I have my grandfather's collection, and I don't have any strong feelings for them. Been trying to find a collector for a few years to give them to. No one around me wants them. Model rocketry. When I was a kid, we all built and glued and fired off model rockets with rocket engines and stuff. This comment made the smell of those rockets come right back to me, and now it makes me want to get back into it. I loved those as a kid. Postcard collecting. I buy a postcard of each place I visit. Some of the places in the world that I visited were very hard to find a postcard in. The hardest country, as we were only there for a day on a cruise, was Dominica. I'm surprised this hasn't come up yet, but china and crystal collections. Another one would be sterling silver, like tea sets, cutlery, and stuff. Slot cars. The narrator loves slot cars, but generally once you've gone to the trouble of setting them up, the fun lasts for maybe 10 minutes. They're just weirdly nice to have and see around, but yeah, all of the enthusiasts do seem to be middle-aged or older. Model trains. There's a store in our town square that's been there for like 50 years that specializes in model trains. It's called a train and toy store, but there are almost no toys there. The store is interesting to walk around in if you're not claustrophobic, but he must not sell very much because he can't pay the rent anymore. He's closing and moving out of town to some building that he owns. Again, the stuff looks cool, but I've never seen anyone buy anything. I don't know, this sounds more like the death of brick-and-mortar retail than the death of that hobby itself. I'm not a model train enthusiast, but I took my son to a model train expo in 2019, and it seemed very alive and well as a hobby. That's just my experience, though. In the UK, it's 100% croquet. I know, what a cliché. When I was younger, everyone had a croquet set, and it was a great way to enjoy time with friends on a summer day in the garden. Whereas now I don't know anyone that still owns one. Maybe a strange one, but this question did get me thinking about it. Geocaching, which is weird because I still do it sometimes while biking around, but caching apps rarely alert me or any of the finders in the apps now. I put $20 into what used to be a super popular cache that people would visit daily like 15 years ago. I later returned about 6 months later, and the same items, including the $20, were still in there. I think a major reason is that the main platform, geocaching.com, started requiring payment for all but the most basic caches. I think this happened sometime in the early or mid-2010s. Pure money grab that is just killing the hobby. I remember when I first started geocaching, I was amazed at all the caches that I'd go and find right away. Nowadays, a newbie would be put off by having to pay for possibly the only caches that were already near them. Pen pals. As a teenager, I loved writing letters to new people and receiving letters from all over the country and the world. Everything is instant now, but nothing beats that feeling of getting a letter in the mail that's specifically for you, that's not a bill or circular, and comes from someone that genuinely wants to brighten your day. Coercion beanie babies. Collecting all 50 US state-minted quarters. I remember there used to be TV commercials selling you fancy cardboard with holes in them to help you collect them all. Oh, how times have changed. Yo, I had all 50 collected at one point, then one of my tweaker aunts stole them. Did it again, and then another desperate family stole the second collection. Collected them all one last time, my mom put it away for safekeeping, and then when we couldn't find it, we assumed someone else stole them. Building model airplanes. Model airplane buying, on the other hand, is alive and well. I mean, yeah, we've got all 300 plus kits in the attic, 15 in the same stage of construction, and 2 that we're actually working on, but god damn it, ClearProp has a new Sea Sprite and I've been looking for it, so I just ordered 3 from Hannon's. You know, wingsuit flying used to be really popular, but then many of them died and it quickly fell out of popularity. Slamming face first into a bridge at 90 miles per hour will really sour future people on trying, regardless of how cool the videos look. Flying kites. Never see that crap anymore. My girlfriend and I brought kites on a whim a few months ago. Hadn't flown a kite in probably 20 years, but we had fun. General aviation and being a private pilot. A series of lawsuits against plane manufacturers combined with insane certification requirements for airplanes and parts have made it so that buying new planes or replacement parts is ludicrously expensive for pretty much anyone earning less than $500K per year. Old, used aircraft from the heydays of the 60s and 80s had been filling the void to an extent over the years, but they're starting to get really worn out, and people feel less and less comfortable flying them as time goes on. And unfortunately, there's just no replacements as they age out. As an example, a brand new Cessna 172 in 1969 cost about $12,500, which is about $90K in today's money. Today, a 2021 model would cost around $400,000. Indoor roller skating rinks. Skating has become popular, yes, but weirdly, the number of roller skating rinks seems to be going down. The 4 within 25 miles of me closed down over the last 15 years. I don't know any of the new ones, and I'm not sure where to go in New England to find an operating rink nowadays. Meanwhile, there's lots of private outdoor groups. It must just be too expensive to have the square footage to support a roller skating rink in an urban area. Flying radio-controlled helicopters and airplanes. Why would someone want to deal with all the hassle of flying a model helicopter that's insanely difficult to fly when they could just buy a DJI drone that has a first-person video stream, records video in 4K, and can fly around by itself via GPS? Yo-yo. Historical reenacting. People no longer want to play dress-up in itchy wool and educate folk on whatever period was their jam. Its heyday was the late 90s when you could just find a group that did just about any period you could imagine. I've got to say, at least in Northern Europe, the reenacting hobby seems to be very much alive and well, often intertwined with the LARP crowd, and I do feel like I know more than one American who does Civil War stuff as well. Bridge. Super complex game, has layers and layers of rules, and it's dead. Even growing up in the 80s, it had a reputation of being a game for groups of older ladies. Drag racing. The vehicular kind. A major track in Georgia just got sold because of a local battery plant that's being built nearby, and the houses around it skyrocketed in value. Tatting lace. I've learned to needle tat and I would love to learn bobbin, but it's hard to find an eventual use for what you get out of it. Like, there's only so many bookmarks and doilies I can make for my IKEA box apartment, considering I can also crochet and knit. Still, it's a beautiful craft that I wish I could figure out how to use. Paintball. It's too expensive, unfortunately, and you need a good selection of people to play. The more players, typically the more diverse the skill range is. I think if it was a lot cheaper, there'd still be loads of players. On average, the routine player will buy 2 cases of paint, 2,000 rounds per case, and each of those will cost 40 to 65 US bucks. Then they pay for entry and CO2, between 25 to 35 bucks, and then buy any other gear they might need or need to replace. Back when 2008 financial crisis happened, most fields I knew lost 3/4 of their serious players, and most of them never returned. Which really sucks because paintball was growing really fast until then. I'm not sure if it's a real hobby, but typewriting will die out eventually. The last typewriters factory closed some years ago. Years ago, I was in IT, and we had this guy who was about 80 years old, who'd go office door to office door and ask each person if their typewriter needed service or repair. He had his cart with spare bits and ink reels and tools and nothing to repair. It was incredibly sad to see the disappointment once or twice a month when telling him no. There were maybe 5 typewriters across 20 floors and several thousand people. The company owner didn't have the heart to let him go. The owner died and his son immediately sold the company and many were laid off, including typewriter guy. That year for Christmas, while the sale was being completed, the son gave out copies of his book instead of bonuses. It was 90 pages, double-spaced, and large font. Teacher here. Hobbies in general are dying. Here's part of why. I regularly meet with parents who balk at the idea of their child doing something for fun. Unless it can translate to a career or college application, it's viewed as a waste of time and money. And if it can translate to one of those, then there's this crushing, constant pressure to be the best at it. We're raising a generation of children who can't comprehend hobbies. Based on young people I know, bowling, billiards, and poker are fading. Board games were experiencing a boom until COVID. D&D is super popular again, though. I don't know, board games are doing just fine. They might not be as visible anymore since people haven't been able to play out in public the past year, but people have been doing virtual sessions of the games or secret in-person games throughout the past year. The Kickstarter scene for board games never stopped, and now that in-person events are coming into fruition again, everyone's excited to bring out all the new games they haven't got to play in the last year. Model trains. The entire hobby is absolutely dead. Huge collections being sold for literal pennies on the dollar. An engine that used to cost $500 might not even sell for $5 now. Clubs. The Rotary Club, the Elks, the Masons, the League of Women Voters, all kinds of fraternal organizations. Beyond that, participation in all kinds of civic organizations, churches, labor unions, sports leagues, hobbyist clubs, they're way down from previous generations. Americans used to be world-renowned for their enthusiastic participation in clubs and civic organizations of all kinds. Now we're becoming an increasingly atomized society. The cost is that today, the average American has fewer close friends, is less likely to know their neighbors, and has less of an informal support network than at any point in history. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not strictly dying, but certainly becoming a bit more difficult. CD collecting. Right now, CDs are in this weird purgatory where we can't decide if we're done with them or not. They've fallen out of favor in terms of practical usage. Most people use streaming services, and many cars don't come with a CD player as standard. They're not totally obsolete, but they're nowhere near as popular as they once were. Many chain stores that specialize in entertainment products have also begun to scale back their stock, both in-store and online. Go to a CD section and browse popular, and for most artists, they'll stock a generic greatest hits collection, their latest release, and if you're really lucky, maybe some of their popular albums. Case in point, I wanted to add Rio by Duran Duran to my collection. It's one of the greatest albums of the 80s, and yet literally no chain stores in my area stocked it. You'd think that would be one that's in wide circulation, but apparently not. The other annoying thing is that they're not old enough to have garnered niche value yet. Vinyl is the new collector's trend, so there's loads of market stalls popping up selling vinyl as the in thing, but CD stalls at markets are dying. Which is a shame, because they were the guys to go to if you wanted to find rare albums. Golf. I read somewhere the other day that the average age of people golfing continues to rise every year. It's too expensive for younger generations, it's not very entertaining to watch unless you really enjoy golf, and it can go extremely long. I'm a young guy who loves playing golf, but goddamn, it's a waste of land and water. Granted, a lot of people these days simply don't have time for hobbies. I feel like the ones who do are indoor things now. For example, video games, writing, card collecting. I know a few people who do calligraphy. So there are still hobbies, it's just quiet stuff. Does it take money? Well, it's dying. Hobbies aren't dying because people aren't interested in them. Hobbies are dying because no one can afford hobbies with the current state of the economy. Hobbies are dying as hobbies. I feel like everything has to be a side hustle now, and people don't just do crap for fun anymore. I don't know that that's true in my part of the world, and I say that as a former unpaid thespian who's now a freelance YouTuber, so sure, that became a hustle. But I have a few major hobbies now, all of which have thriving communities. Can't believe I haven't seen this yet, but film photography. Used to be, with a bit of work, you could make a passable darkroom in a closet or your basement and develop your own film. The ease of digital photography was the first nail in that coffin in the late 90s and early 2000s, but it lingered on for a while as the quality of digital sensors just wasn't there yet. Now, digital DSLR has gotten to the point that it's all but killed anything short of the most hardcore film enthusiasts. There are many out there that will argue film still exceeds digital in some metrics, but regardless of those points, the industry and hobby have essentially collapsed. Those disagreeing are simply working on a different timescale. My entire family was a Rochester Kodak family, 4 generations of employment in film. From that perspective, film is dying. It's a minuscule fraction of what it once was. That the cost of film cameras is going up is a natural consequence of the supply of film cameras dwindling as parts and camera themselves dry up. 58 Corvettes cost more than they did in 1958, and I guarantee you that's not because they have more customers they did back then. Simply a ratio of demand to lesser supply and collector's status. I suspect many of you are much younger and don't quite understand how prolific film was in the mid-90s and earlier. Anyone could set up shop in their basement without too much work, from the high school photo students to Inga and Hans making their amateur adult films. To drive this point further home, I'm a career and technical education or CTE teacher. Film photography used to qualify for CTE funding at the federal level. In order to qualify for this, there must be demonstrable career opportunities in film photography as measured by the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. With the change to Perkins v. legislation, film photography is no longer qualifying for CTE funding for the first time since it started receiving funding several decades ago. This is indicative that the BLS has measured sustained downward trends year on year for multiple years, which in turn means there's not a viable economic pathway to sustain hobbyists, such that the feds won't fund any students attempting to enter that career field. Don't get me wrong, I think it's lovely if you enjoy it as a hobby. It's a great art form. I had a darkroom in my basement as a kid. Someone might be starting a new mom and pop shop, but that pales in comparison to the thousands that have closed. Nikon might be making some film cameras, but that's nothing compared to the monoliths or duoliths that were Kodak and Fujifilm. Particularly now that the final contracts for film radiography and film videography at Kodak have expired, they're clinging for dear life to any whisper of profit that they can. Working on your own car. I'm talking engine, clutches, and bodywork. Wiffle ball. Used to be that every boy from 8 to 13 had one. Baseball in general seems to be falling out of favor as a youth sport. I don't know if it's falling off on the pro level of attendance or viewership-wise, but anecdotally, our kids are getting to organized sports playing age, and we don't know anyone signing their kids up for Little League. Baseball was hype when I was a kid too. Between multiple MLB expansion teams, I was in the Marlins' backyard, and kid-marketed movies like Sandlot, Rookie of the Year, and Angels in the Outfield, it felt like everyone I knew was playing it for at least a couple of years. Sport card collecting conventions used to be a huge thing. Now maybe a few grey hairs get together to trade, buy and sell. Model trains, who has the space or time anymore? And building theremins at home. Ceramics. There used to be 2 or 3 shops in every small town, where you could go, pick a piece, clean it, they'd fire it for you, then come back a week later and paint it. They'd fire it for you again. Then you'd go and pick up your finished masterpiece. It was so refreshing. I'm 24. When I was a kid, there was one pottery place across the street. I always wondered what it was, but never went in. I can't remember when they closed, maybe 15 years ago? They still have all of the ceramic pieces from in the window on display. It looks like it's stuck in the past. I don't know if it's dying in popularity, but beekeeping has definitely undergone a shift in my lifetime. It used to be that every farm you drove past had a small hive or two tucked away somewhere. It was a side crop in the many crops that were grown. Now it's got a pretty large initial investment cost, and you see more beekeepers that are young people with a garden in their backyard. It's expensive and time-consuming and frequently puzzling. It's also occasionally painful and sometimes heartbreaking. I still love it though. Tuner cars. Yes, the community does still exist, but the days of throwing a cold air intake and some springs on your Civic are long gone, and it's only for people with deep pockets now. It doesn't help that the supply of affordable, lightweight, entry-level performance cars is basically zero now, and the ones left over from the 90s and early noughties are so supply-constrained, you need to be able to produce at least $10,000 in cash just to buy one anymore. Never mind the cost of parts has gone up substantially too. I'm holding out hope that the first-generation BRZ or FRS 86 ends up bringing it back somewhat, but they're not cheap enough. They're still around $15,000 for something with 80,000 miles on it. And they're not produced in large enough numbers either. Scrapbooking. Nobody prints pictures anymore. Ventriloquism. In my opinion, this one can stay away. Yeah, as much as the narrator feels that all art is valid, the people and their talking dolls, while impressive, were also slightly creepy. But it's sad that they're going away. It's legitimately a magic skill to me. Basically, everything the news says that millennials killed. AKA, the industry failed to adapt to the free market and it's trying to blame its customers for the fact that it sucks. Collecting spoons. I'm a teenager, yet I often enjoy finding spoons at cool tourist attractions. My personal favorite is one I got from Prague during Christmas time. It has revolving dice in the handle. I live in Northern California wine country, about 60 miles north of San Francisco, and around here, it's golf. Even though we have a huge footprint of retired people, all of the local golf courses are slowly going under. It might be because a loop is like $120 during the week and $200 on a weekend. Recreational fentanyl use. Most people are answering with hobbies that have a very low influx of new hobbyists, and others are disproving them by showing how much money is still being traded hands in that hobby, which is to be expected when you're talking about a hobby where the most participants are boomers and Gen Xers with more disposable income than us. Prank calls are a dying art form. Pretty soon, kids won't even get it. Nobody picks up their phone for a number they don't recognize. Comic book stores have basically had to load the store up with trading cards, Funko Pops, and tchotchkes to survive, while the actual comic books get cast into a small corner. The Marvel and DC movies might make billions, but it's done zero to increase interest in the comics themselves. DIY wood projects. I was going to build new 23-inch raised beds for my garden this year, but when an 8-foot 2x12 costs $60, my hobby needs professional financing. Square dancing is quite literally dying. Average age of any tip is about 65 or older. Good callers are a rarity. Actually playing trading card games and not just investing in the most hyped set. Swing dancing got really popular for a while in the late 90s. Haven't heard much about that in a long time. Barbershop quartetting. For as long as I've been in the society, the membership prices and convention registrations have always been way too expensive for something you don't even need an instrument for, and there aren't as many conventions a year as I think there should be because it's probably just too hard to justify the administrative costs. There's a ton of us, just not enough to make the scene really shine outside of the really big events. What's the worst way you've seen someone get rejected? I always remember an incident when I was around 11. I was picked to go on this summer camp kind of trip for a week with a bunch of kids the year above me. They were 12 and 13-year-olds. This was because of my good behavior. I was the only 11-year-old. There was a boy I'd had a crush on for a while, and on the first day he asked me to be his girlfriend. Obviously, we were all children, so that doesn't even mean anything. But he kept going for the whole week, sending me notes, hugging me in the hall before we were sent to our separate dorms, and then on our last night I got a note asking me to meet him in the hall. When I went out, the entire group was there, like 35 to 40 kids, all crying with laughter. He announced to everyone it had been an entire joke that the whole group had been in on, and he had never been interested in an ugly teacher's pet like me. As an adult, I'm obviously not remotely upset about the romantic rejection, because I was 11. But the social rejection and the public humiliation aspect was tough. Anyway, I'm 24 now, and he slid into my DMs after high school, and I told him to go F himself, which felt good. This happened in the 6th grade. I was bullied badly throughout elementary school. For reasons I still don't understand, I was made a social outcast by the mean girls. I was walking home from school with one of the cool boys in class who was always nice to me one-on-one, but eagerly joined the bullying otherwise. He told me that one of the girls in class was having a party after school and that I should come. I was so excited to be invited to a party with the cool kids. I went home, told my mum, and rode my bike to the girl's house. I rang the doorbell and the whole group answered. One of them said, "Oh my god, she actually came," and they all laughed. Then the girl whose house it was said, "You can go now," and shut the door in my face. I was too ashamed to go back home and tell my mum what had happened, so I rode my bike around aimlessly, crying, for a couple of hours before going home. I'm 35 years old now, and that memory still stings. I'm so grateful that I had a loving home life and social media wasn't around yet. I don't know if I would have made it through otherwise. Don't be bullies, kids. I was having a party for my 13th birthday. I sent my crush an invite. A week after giving them out, I found a bit of torn paper on the school field. I recognized the color and pattern, then looked up, and there was the rest of it, torn into tiny pieces. The kind of tearing that takes time and effort to get it into that many. 10 out of 10 would not be a teenage girl again. I went out for lunch with the dude I had a crush on. I told him I liked him, and he said, "Are you aware of the concept of the friend zone?" My friends and I have laughed about this for years. I thought the friend zone was something that people imagined they were in as a weird coping mechanism to being rejected, not a thing that we actively sales-pitched people into being in. Hilarious. When I was 11, the boy I was crushing on said he didn't want to go out with me because I was ugly in front of all of my friends. We ended up getting together in our late teens, and we've now been together for 13 years. He doesn't remember this incident, but he's devastated that he ever said this to me, even as a child. I think that's a reminder of how saying something hurtful to someone like that will stick with the person you said it to for a long time, but the person who said it forgets it with no problem. It's not exactly a rejection, but it was me being completely oblivious and optimistic because a cute boy was nice to me. I met a guy at a club meeting in college who I thought was pretty cute. He invited me to hang out a couple of times to do homework or grab breakfast together in the dining hall and seemed into me. Compliments and lots of eye contact, and he listened to me when I talked, but never made a physical move. But we were both 18-year-old virgins meeting in public places, so it wasn't unreasonable to assume he was just shy, because I certainly was. After a while, he invited me to go see a movie, so I figured that this was like a date, right? I met up with him at the movie theater, and it turned out he was going with a group of people, and it wasn't just the two of us. That should have been a signal, but nope. I spent the first half of the movie trying to snuggle up to him, hold his arm or his hand, to be cute, and I finally started to realize that he was super not into it when I rested my hand on his knee and he picked it up and returned it to my lap. We got out of the theater and he turned to me in front of everyone and said, you know I'm gay, right? If the ground could have opened up and swallowed me whole at that moment, I would have welcomed it. I felt awful that I'd spent an hour or so trying to snuggle up with someone who was uncomfortable and too polite to tell me to back off, and I still cringe to think about it now. I got sat down for coffee with my boyfriend of 2 years, and he said, "I'm bored of you now. Let's break up." Then picked up his coffee and left. It tore at me for a while, but I got over it. I'm more angry than anything that he wasted my time. How the frick can people do this to people they've been in relationships with? And long ones. Romantic relationships are so damn scary. I don't want to spend years with someone only for them to easily toss me away. After living with my boyfriend, now ex, for a couple of years, I was going through a bit of a depression. Things started to look up and I was starting to put my life back together. We'd only done the deed a few times in as many months, and he mentioned that when I was ready, he'd like me to initiate. He didn't want to pressure me. Great, he's been super understanding so far, and this just shows how supportive he is. The next day I try to initiate because I have a cool, understanding, supportive boyfriend that I love. He stops me and says, "Don't you want to lose some weight first? I don't want you to be upset if I can't get hard because of your belly flab." Noped out of that relationship real quick. Honestly, it was just absurd enough that I kind of laughed it off and I didn't take it personally. This story is from last year and probably still counts as my most painful and confusing rejection. I'd known a man for several years online and we'd gotten very close. We'd met on World of Warcraft and we played together literally every day for 2 years, talking on Discord, and eventually we started flirting a bit. He was begging me to come visit him, as he lives across the country, unfortunately, and I enthusiastically said yes, because at this point I'm stupidly in love. He spends months going on and on about his feelings for me, how he's always liked me and how he's in love, how I'm so beautiful and he can't wait to kiss me, all that stuff. At this point, he's video chatted with me multiple times and seen many full body pictures of me, so he definitely knows what I look like, which brings me to the weird part. We finally meet, and he treats me like a sister, and seems really uncomfortable with the idea of kissing all of a sudden. The trip was very fun, but I felt very rejected. I tried hugging him when we got back to his place and he was visibly uncomfortable, telling me that he wasn't ready to make a physical move despite him being the one begging me to come to be with him. I felt really rejected and repulsive, and he even sat on a different couch from me across the room despite telling me how much he wanted to cuddle for 2 years. Late that night I asked him what was up and he said that he found our age difference off-putting, which really upset me because he knew my age since the day we met and he's not even that much older than me. It really felt like a lame excuse. To this day, I have no idea what really happened. My only 2 guesses are that I look fatter in person than he was expecting, or that he had an actual girlfriend somewhere else. I'm still salty about the waste of my time and money. I got ghosted by a guy that I'd been seeing for a year. I saw him at a bar a few months later and he tried to come over and greet me like nothing had happened, but I stuck my hand in his face and walked away. Maybe not the most grown-up thing to do, but he ghosted me, so screw him. Lost my virginity to my boyfriend at the time. 2 days later, he dumped me via text. The whole, "it's not you, it's me" thing. To a freshly 18-year-old girl, though, that obviously meant nothing. There was a happy ending, though. After that, I vowed to never do the deed with someone I couldn't see myself marrying ever again. That's just a personal choice for myself. I have no issue at all with people doing it casually. It just wasn't something I wanted. Sure enough, a year and a half later, at 19 years old, I met a guy that seemed to check all the boxes. I moved forward, deciding that even if we didn't end up married, it was worth it because he showed me how I wanted to be loved by someone. We've been together for 7 years, married for almost 5. A guy told me he only dared to talk to me because I was the ugliest girl in the room. I mean, that's a play, a really crappy play that hopefully never works for anyone who uses it, but what the heck do I know? I've never met someone who's used negging who wasn't also a garbage human being, to be honest. When I was about 14, a new kid came to our school and I made quick friends with him. We played Xbox Live a lot. I developed a quick crush. He texted me to get on live because he needed to tell me something. "Hey, I wanted to tell you that I really like you." I was excited, but pretty sure it was a joke. "Are you messing with me? I really like you, it's not a joke." So I believed him. "Chrissy, will you go out with me?" And I said yes. "April Fools, I'd never go out with you." And then he laughed for a good few minutes. I left the call and was really hurt. He continued to bully me for a few years after that, telling me to self-delete and that I was ugly. and that nobody liked me. He moved away before senior year, and I got to actually enjoy it without getting bullied. In 4th grade, my boyfriend broke up with me by slamming a basketball in my face on the crowded playground. Worst period of my life. I'd literally just gotten out of an awful relationship that involved several instances of the unspeakable act, as well as physical attacks. I had rampant PTSD, I knew it, and was foolishly trying to fill the void with alcohol and other people. I met someone on Tinder. He was a medical student and really smart, funny, handsome, and nice to me. I was wary about getting used or hurt again, so I made it my policy not to meet anyone in person that I hadn't spent some time talking to. We texted pretty much non-stop for weeks. I even opened up about my mental health, and he was seemingly kind and responsive. We planned a date. The night before we'd planned to go out, he was in the area and invited himself over to my apartment. I insisted that he not come because, as I said, my mental health wasn't in a great place, and my apartment was in a pretty rough shape. But he insisted it was fine, that he didn't mind, that he accepted me and just wanted to spend a bit of time with me. So I had him come by. We talked for a bit, and he started kissing me. One thing led to another, and I don't know, I didn't feel ready for it, but I didn't feel that was important. We ended up doing the deed. It was a nice night, I guess. We talked about our plans for the next night, and it was implied that he was into me and that we'd be seeing each other again. There was no indication whatsoever that anything was wrong on his part. Then he left in the morning. Again, we'd been texting non-stop, and then it just slowed to a halt. He blew off our date. A couple of days later, I asked him what was up, and he essentially said that I was too messy for him and that it had put him off. Then I never heard from him again. Really felt like there was something between us. I'd basically let him earn my trust, and then he bolted once he got the notch in his belt. That really frickin' hurt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This is the reverse story. When I was 15, a guy at school asked me out on a date. I assumed he was making fun of me, so I didn't say anything and just walked away. I was pretty proud of my response at that time, considering I usually said something awkward or made things worse when people made fun of me. It didn't occur to me until years later that he might have been serious. I was talking to a guy for a while and finally felt comfortable enough to send him a more risque photo. I didn't send out any fully undressed photos or anything, but I liked this guy, so I gave him something. I sent the photo and he replied back with, got anything better to impress me? His reasoning when I pressed him was, well, you're just so hot. I just wanted you to send more pictures. Nope, I stopped talking to him shortly after. After 22 years of marriage, he said he didn't want to be married anymore. What that translated to was, I am effing your friend. When I was like 11, I used to go to these social dance things with my friends. It wasn't really my deal. I've always been introverted, so they insisted I go. I remember my friends pushing me to ask this guy to dance. I didn't want to, and then he came and asked me. So I said okay. After that night, my friends said it was on a dare, and the dude and his friends came over throughout the night to tell me that I was ugly. So yeah, not really a rejection, but probably one of the worst things that's happened to me regarding the opposite gender. There was a really cute redhead cop or sheriff who used to come into the same gym as me and just walk on the treadmill for 3 to 5 miles every single day. I'd talked to her a few times and she seemed friendly enough, smart too, so I kept talking to her. No real intentions of asking her out, but I did enjoy our banter. Then came this fateful Monday evening. As I was wrapping up my workout and she's walking her 500 miles, just to walk 500 miles, I stopped in for a quick chat. It starts off innocently enough, but pretty quickly she starts spewing some nonsense about leagues and the audacity of certain guys to approach her, and if I'm, referring to me, the best she can do, she's just going to give up on dating altogether. I walked away without saying a word, but she followed me out with some final advice of, I guess you shouldn't talk to me on a Monday, huh? I followed that sage advice, which works so well I've extended it to the rest of the week. Haha, my god. Well, there's not liking unsolicited approaches from strangers, and then there's insulting them when they come up and telling them that they're hideously ugly. I'd say that's going a bit far in the majority of cases. One ex told me he was done now and just wanted to see what it was like dating a black woman. My last ex was a weird roller coaster. He was heavily Christian, outspoken, and pretty haughty about it too, and it came out that he had told me that he has an addiction for all things in the bedroom. Then he said he was getting therapy for it. Then he said he'd been on special interest sites, sending messages and pictures to girls in other states for the duration of our time together. 3 years. After all that, no. Just no. Then almost a year later, homie is seen at a local special bedroom interest event. So I guess therapy's going great. On my books for the oddest breakup I've had, and I'm nearing 30. I think it was freshman year in high school. I just spent the summer in Switzerland, where I'd had the most amazing summer romance with this gorgeous Swiss boy named Bastian. This was the boost I needed to think I might finally be popular and get attention from cute boys at home. There was this boy Jason I'd had a crush on forever, so I just talked to him one day. He was distant, but I kept trying. Then I guess he got sick of me, and he had 2 of his friends find me at my gymnastics gym of all places, and as I was sweaty, exhausted from practice, and wearing a leotard, which always made me feel a little conspicuous, they said something like, "Just so you know, Jason will never be interested in a girl with a small chest and a retard for a brother." And then they laughed as they walked away. My brother has extreme autism, so I'd heard cruel comments before, but it just crushed me. Jason actually saw me at college 5 to 6 years later and apologized. I guess he felt bad about it for years. Oh, this one that happened at 11 years old, definitely. I was asked out on camp by a boy I liked, and I was nervous to hold his hand. He broke up with me literally 20 minutes later because I was nervous. You're not the kind of girl I want to date. Being around you is emotionally exhausting. You radiate negative energy. I was 23, and to be fair, I was really depressed at the time, but geez, my dude. I dated a woman for a year, then she got a job offer and moved across the country to California for work and begged me to come with her. I loved her, so I did. Then she was there for 3 months while I was looking for a job and getting my life sorted to come with. I visited for 2 weeks during this time to be with her, find a place, and interview. The visit was amazing, and we talked and video chatted every day I was back in Florida. She was pretty homesick and was having trouble acclimating to everything, but was really looking forward to when I could just be there with her. I landed a job via phone interview, and we both celebrated. Early January, I'm packing the truck and getting ready for a cross-country drive, leaving my siblings and parents, all of whom I'm very close with, and then I noticed she sounded weird on the phone. She's being short on the video calls, but I chalk it up to her not being happy, since she says she's fine. So I'm stressing, trying to get there to help out. One day into my drive, I was talking to her before bed and she didn't say "I love you too" like she normally would. I ask her what's going on and she tells me we'll talk when I get there. So now I have days of mindless interstate desert driving to think about what could be going on and what's changed. She's not giving any details, being very short on the phone and refusing to video chat. I'm barely sleeping at night from the stress while also driving 18 hours a day to try and get there as fast as I can. I arrive to sign my apartment lease, half move in, shower, and go to see her since she's now done with work. She's a live-in nanny, so I couldn't move in with her. I knock, she opens the door, and from the look on her face, I know what I've been afraid of for days is true. Our relationship is over. She explains to me over the next week that she's homesick, she's originally from Brazil, and that she wants to go back there to be with her family. Then it comes that she started talking with her ex and is planning on getting back together with him on her return. I'm barely processing my emotions at this point, and just trying to change her mind by spending time together. She has a flight with plans to leave. I get 1 week before she leaves the country. We spend our time together, getting along like we always did, still big chemistry, and we're enjoying ourselves, until I'm reminded she's still leaving. 1 week passes, I drive her to the airport, and she flew out of my life, leaving me thousands of miles from anyone I cared about. I was deeply depressed. I stayed for the duration of my 6-month lease, doing nothing but work, eat, sleep, and repeat. Then I drove back to Florida. In short, I planned for months, changed jobs, and moved thousands of miles to be with someone, and they left after a week. When I was about 17, I went to the park on a double date with a good friend of mine and 2 guys we'd just met. We'd been there for about 10 minutes when dude 1 suddenly shouts, "I'll bet you $10 I can run through those trees and back in 60 seconds," and he just takes off into the forest. After a few minutes, dude number 2 decides his friend must have gotten lost, runs to his car and just drives away. We never saw or heard from either of those guys again. It was a very strange experience because these guys pursued us, and we're still not sure what made them run for the hills after spending just 10 minutes alone with us. This certainly takes the prize for the strangest answer here. Honestly, I was just relieved to get a breather from people being more awful. I was in love with someone, and I sent him undressed photos because he asked me to. But the last one I sent, looking back, wasn't very flattering, so from then on, he ghosted me. It really broke my heart, like I really thought we could pursue a relationship, and I showed him the most intimate parts of me. I'm a 6'4" female, and it's hard for people to look past my height. I was single for a long time, so I was on Tinder and other sites, and I always had to give people a warning before I met them in person. Tall guys are fine, but apparently tall girls scare people. I've talked to people for weeks and then met up with them, and I can see the shock in their faces, but everything goes really well, and afterwards they just end up ghosting me or block me. It's really disheartening. Tall guys usually like short girls, so a lot of the people I was meeting up with were shorter guys. Not always that much shorter than me, but apparently they still had issues with it. I even had someone tell me if I wasn't so tall, I would have been the perfect girlfriend, but they can't deal with the height. I could only take so many of these rejections before it started to really get to my head, so I was done with all that. It's crazy that it's something that I have absolutely no control over. I dated a girl in high school for almost 6 months, and we both lost our virginity to each other. We lived like a 2-minute walk from each other's houses, so we'd hang out every day at her house since her parents were never home. We'd never really talked at school unless it was just a passing comment. One day I went and tried to talk to her and her friends, and she acted like she didn't know me. I got upset and mentioned that we'd been dating for almost 6 months, and she said it was all in my head and that she didn't know who I was. Later that day I was supposed to go to her house. She texted me asking where I was and called me crying because I didn't show up. I broke up with her that day. What moronic, empty gestures has your job made for the benefit of the employees? Today, my employer held a catered leadership conference for managers only, aiming to improve employee morale. Essentially, the managers were all brought into the conference room, played team-building games, and had breakfast and lunch catered for them. This is because it was noticed that general employee morale was low and there was a high turnaround for the entry-level worker. What actually happened was most employees had to skip lunch, work overtime, and take on many extra tasks in order to make up for all the absent managers. This made the entire staff bitter and created an us versus them attitude in the workplace. Wait, you have managers who actually do stuff? To the point where you have to work harder to make up for their absence? Man, must be nice. Our company created a Facebook page and sent out an email with the link to everyone's work accounts, advertising it and asking everyone to like them on Facebook. Facebook is blocked at my work, by the way. Mine is doing the same. They want us to promote a product and even set up a game with links to Facebook and Twitter. I guess they expect you to participate from home or something. I just might win a free water bottle, fingers crossed. Ugh. My old company was having a morale problem. Me and my workers had been pulling serious overtime trying to get all of the work done. For 2 weeks straight, we'd essentially come in at 7:30 a.m. and left at 6:30 p.m. without taking lunch. Finally, after we'd started openly talking about how angry we were that we were doing these hours and were still getting complained at for making tiny errors here and there, they decided to reward our department with lunch. When our lunch hour came, the 4 of us walked in to find all the food had been eaten by the managers, and they'd left us 2 egg rolls and a handful of fried rice. Morale had never been higher. In my place of work, we've gotten extremely busy in the last few months. They expanded their stores into Florida. Instead of giving the employees much needed or deserved raises, we got oranges. Yep, oranges. They thought they were being clever being in Florida and all. Just made me angry. Creating an on-the-second policy. You have to be at your desk exactly the second your workday begins. This has created an atmosphere where they find it really hard to get anyone to do anything extra. On the second the workday ends, everyone leaves. Before we didn't care about a minute or two here and there. Yeah, I've never heard of this policy being implemented without this predictable and warranted result. Turns out most people will work pretty well on a task-based workload and resent being policed at all times. I used to work in catering as a chef, and we once catered a company-wide going-away party for the head of a large local company that makes exercise equipment. The reason that the company head was leaving was to go on a Mormon mission, but that's neither here nor there. The executives ate on a dais at the head of a large conference room, elevated a few feet above the ground. They ate smoked beef tenderloin with a Calvados demi-glace, haricots, roast new potatoes, Caesar salad, and all manner of breads and rolls, with handmade chocolate mousse in a champagne glass for dessert. The employees, on the other hand, were left to mill about on the conference room floor and enjoy their fully catered meal of donuts. Yep, they got to eat crappy store-bought donuts and watch their bosses and managers enjoy a multi-course, fully catered meal in full view of the masses of peons. That was close to 10 years ago, and it still leaves a bad taste in my mouth. My company has an annual trip for people voted as MVP from each office location, plus executives and salespeople who make quota. The trips are usually very fancy, all expenses paid affairs with tons of swag. Cut to the height of the Great Recession. We have our quarterly town hall meeting. The CEO stands there in front of a screen, showcasing photos from this trip. I'm talking about pictures of people receiving fancy watches and going on helicopter rides. Whilst these photos are showing, he gives a speech about tightening our belts, no raises that year, and all salaried employees having to take 2 weeks off without pay. This is with pictures of him and all the other execs in the background, drinking champagne on a helicopter behind him. People were angry to say the least. Our company decided to give out a weekly prize to randomly selected employees as a way to boost morale. The winner's name, title, and prize was emailed to everyone in the company. Some of these prizes were things like iPads and TVs, so at first, this seemed cool. Then we started realizing that the people who won the big prizes were all VPs and above. Lower-level employees won things like a tote bag full of promotional materials. Now, whenever a regular person wins, he or she gets a flood of congratulatory emails from bemused coworkers. "Congrats on winning that plastic cup, John. You must be so proud." In order to improve morale, my previous employer set up a suggestion box. When people anonymously submitted their gripes, management got frustrated and said we had to put our names on our suggestions. What's the point of a suggestion box if it's not anonymous? If I'm going to put my name on it, I'll just email you directly. I don't suppose it was for the benefits of the employees, but I worked at a stationery store that sold DVDs, CDs, and the like, W.H. Smith. They had a management meeting about security and shoplifting. So, already short-staffed, the supervisors, managers, and security guards spent 2 hours upstairs nattering. Worst day for shoplifting the store had ever had. Hilarious. I was knocked back from an internship at a world-leading insurance company last year because when you showed up, you looked a bit like an IT guy. Considering I was applying for an IT internship and my technical background is IT, I have no idea what this human resources goon was expecting. HR is terrible. When I was hiring here, my interviewer basically gave me tips to lie to HR to make it easier for myself. This was my bonehead move. I was new to managing in the taxi world and thought, hey, let's throw a barbecue and get to know everyone. Turns out a lot of Muslims are taxi drivers and that Ramadan is kind of a big deal. Well, now I throw what I call a halal BQ a few days before Ramadan starts. It's pretty nice. When I worked at McDonald's, there was a month where they put a digital scale by the shake machine. We had to zero out the weight of a cone each time and make sure that every customer was getting exactly 5 ounces of ice cream. A cone with too much got thrown out. It's hard to appreciate the difficulty of making a cone, let alone a perfect one. This just ended up being a massive waste of time and money. Congratulations, you've won a dinner with your boss. Ugh. I actually wouldn't mind that, depending on the boss. If you've got a good boss, it would be a good opportunity to voice some concerns. If you've got a bad boss, it's a good chance to become buddies, since lousy bosses always seem to favor their friends over others. I work in the back room of a large retail store. We're understaffed with hours cut and the only section of the store to run independently after 3:30. We have 1 supervisor. Yet we have the highest rank in the nation in terms of speed and accuracy. We still get called lazy by the higher-ups. Our grocery and pharmacy outlet was involved in a company-wide push to boost profits over the holiday season. If we came out on top with the greatest percentage increase over all other outlets, then we'd receive a handsome Christmas bonus. We came out on top, but the only ones to reap rewards were upper management. Among the 30-plus employees, we would have stood to make nearly $1,000 apiece for our hard work during the holidays. Instead, management split it amongst the top 3, giving them a little under $10K each. Those who complained were fired and given crap excuses why. I don't work for that crap company anymore, nor do I ever have to see the greedy management that kept me and my family from my rightful Christmas bonus. Screw them. We think it's in your best interest to not know how much the company pays of your insurance premium. Turned out it was 0%. A motivational speech was given to some of our assembly guys, and 2 of their managers were trying to get them to see the importance of working hard as a team. Here's what they had to say. Just think about slave ships. If everyone didn't keep rowing through the storm, the boat would capsize and they'd all drown. I mean, as moronic as these guys are, I appreciate how forthright they are with their view of the employees. Now you know that you can treat the job with the same enthusiasm as someone being neither paid nor treated well. My wife is always flabbergasted at the crap my company wastes money on. The lamest was wooden back scratchers with the company logo on them that they handed out to everyone. I used to work at a movie theater as a supervisor and later a projectionist. While we were making the transition to digital projectors, we were informed that we'd be keeping 1 or 2 of the old film projectors in case one of the movies we were showing wasn't available in a digital format. They told us they were going to keep us on, but gave us extra duties to justify the 80% reduction in workload. It seemed fair. Fast forward a few weeks and we got the heads up that they wanted us to train a couple of managers on how to thread up a film projector and start it. They then had a giant appreciation party for us at a local go-kart track, where at the end they told us that the managers were all going to be handling the projection equipment from then on. They then offered us jobs as part-time regular employees, starting at minimum wage, with an adjustment based on other merit raises we'd been given. I would have gone from 40 hours a week at $13 an hour to 25 hours a week at $8.75. On the last go-kart race, I ran the general manager into a wall at 30 miles per hour. At my firm, we used to have the CEO that felt really entitled and was just a huge jerk. The company HQ was in a 3-story building with 2 stairways, one on each end of the building. His office was next to the stairway entrance on one end of the building. For some reason, he believed this was an executive staircase and only he was allowed to use it. Whenever he found another employee in it, he'd yell at them and threaten to write them up. So, all employees had to use the other stairway regardless of where their office was in the building. It was such a huge inconvenience. Well, we all had the last laugh. He went on this great vacation to Europe, and little did he know that while he was gone, the board of directors had fired him. His company vehicle was removed from his property, his access to company networks was revoked, his keycards were deactivated, and his office was packed up and placed outside the building the morning he arrived. He was truly blindsided. He came in claiming his car was stolen only to see it parked in front ready for the next CEO. Karma. I work at a theatre, and we were pushed to sell these membership cards to 2% of our guests. At the end of the year, we ended up being one of the few theatres that ended up doing it. So instead of giving everyone their bonuses or raises or even a thank you party, the GM got to fly all the way to California and Las Vegas. We also hadn't had anyone internally promoted within the last year or so. The last 2 positions that were open were filled from the outside. Needless to say, everyone was really mad. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Our VP's speech at the annual employee meeting. Now, we're all about work-life balance here, but we have to work harder and longer. Mental fricking pygmy. You know, it seems like most of these companies' plans was to unite them around a common enemy, the managers. Every year, my hotel holds a staff party at which door prizes are given away. Our main competitor had theirs the week before, and staff with friends and spouses at that hotel reported back to us about the party's door prizes. iPhones, iPads, mini fridges filled with beer or groceries, the grand prize being a week for 4 at any hotel in their chain, including airfare and meals. Then our party came and my company's crapulence was revealed. All the door prizes were free 3 nights at specific hotels in our chain, no airfare, nothing else. Crappy hotels in non-destination cities and towns. 3 free nights in a hotel you had no desire to see, in a city you had 0 reason to visit, and the prize winner had to cover their own airfare into the bargain. Staff morale plunged to an all-time low when 1 month later the managers all had their weekend advance on a 4-day weekend at a nearby 5-star resort, all expenses covered including golf and sailing. When Circuit City was still around, I was a warehouse manager. The company was struggling from spending too much on planograms and such. So, what did they do? They spent tens of millions developing a new POS system called our POS, which we lovingly called our piece of excrement. I actually worked in the test store that was the first to get it in the nation. We had the dev team in for months working out kinks that we'd find and whatnot, and I discovered a pretty major flaw. The system would just randomly lose items in inventory, like $4,000 TVs on a daily basis. I told them about this all the time and they said they'd reevaluate or something. They didn't believe me and it had to be human error. So, when the next distribution truck came in, we took complete inventory before accepting the shipment into our POS. And wouldn't you know it, we were immediately missing 25 grand in merch. So, what did they do? They never fixed it, pushed it out to stores, and subsequently went bankrupt. And the old system wasn't even bad. Sure, it was dated, but once you knew the way around, it was gold. My workplace has yearly mandatory barbecues. They call them meetings. The meeting lasts for about 20 minutes and the rest is barbecue and pool and stuff. Sounds awesome, but it is mandatory that you show up and it is mandatory that you bring some food. You will be written up and or fired if you don't. So they scheduled this year's barbecue meetup in the middle of the day on a day I already never work because I go to school. I kept telling them I couldn't miss a day. I'm in a really competitive program, as in 200 people trying to get into an 18-slot program, so I absolutely can't mess up. My bosses said if I didn't show up, I'd get fired. So, I didn't show up. I actually forgot. I was just going to show up late originally. Then no one said anything and no Fs were given. I saw the photos on Facebook and it just seemed really lame. All the stupid cliques were there, same old bullcrap, just outside of work, not getting paid for it. And I'm sure that at each barbecue they ask, "Why is nobody having fun? I specifically requested it." I don't get it. Surely these managers have their own social lives that they have to sacrifice in order to hold these things? How are they not as annoyed about them as you are? I'm not even joking. I was deployed in middle-of-nowhere Afghanistan in 2002, and my jerk colonel tripped over a rock walking from the command tent to the latrine at night. 30 minutes later, me and the other lowest-ranking airmen were outside picking up rocks with flashlights near the perimeter of the base in the middle of the damn night. I never thought I might die for a more stupid reason than I did that night. All raises were cut for the last 3 years and replaced with gifts. Flowers year 1, lunchbox year 2, and an umbrella year 3. All were of cheap quality and clearly designed for women. I'm a male nurse, or a nurse. Yay! I just left my gifts at work. At my office, we hired a mediator to come in and address some of the workplace concerns. Our communication and interaction with one particular employee was lacking. This employee had a competitive nature that borders on overbearing and uncomfortable. The mediator broke us all into pairs of 2 and asked us to arm wrestle with each other, and the winner of each match would receive a chocolate. Each group was given a bag of chocolates. Well, everyone split up and performed the task. Everyone just communicated that neither participant cared about winning and just wanted the chocolate, so everyone just split the bags. Except for the one employee we had issues with. She dominated her opponent and got every last piece of chocolate. The mediator was befuddled, gave a little speech, and left. We learned nothing. In short, mediator had our office do team-building exercises, realized we were beyond help, and left. My company really wanted to get the employees involved and excited about the new direction of the company in terms of rebranding and new marketing strategies. So they spent a lot of time trying to get people excited by the future and where we were going, and of course none of us in my office appreciated it given that they'd announced a week earlier that our office would be closed and all our work would be moved out of the country. Most people here felt like we were constantly being told how great things would be once we were gone. Insult to injury, the aggressive new marketing used the product we developed as the flagship product. When I was 20, I was the lead supervisor on a program evaluation contract, supervising 45 employees. The project was finished when I was out of the office. I worked 12 through 8 p.m. It finished around 10:30 that morning. My boss called and told me it was finished and everyone was going out to eat to celebrate. So I said, "Oh, I'll come in now, give me a few minutes." And she said, "Great, we need you to come supervise the other team, who wasn't on that project, while we go." So freaking stupid. Everything at that job was stupid, including letting a 20-year-old develop an evaluation for a statewide program on green jobs just out of the blue. I made the whole thing based on a few Wikipedia articles. Screw it. It was really successful and a lot of other states use it now, but I ultimately got fired for wanting to be paid the same amount as the other supervisor whose team didn't do as well as mine. But it was a boys' club, so I got fired. Jerks. The company held a meeting where people actually have to travel and get hotels in the home city, including the CEO. The meeting was something where the CEO was supposed to talk about the state of the company and stuff like that. Morale was generally low because they'd been cracking the whip on everyone for the last 2 years. Everyone was working 10 to 16 hours a day, sometimes on the weekends too, on a salary. So, the CEO starts talking, making his presentation, and towards the end of the hour, the hotel staff start setting up chafing dishes and setting food out. Everyone's really hungry. The Q&A period is prolonged for an extra hour because people keep asking dumb questions. So, finally it ends and everyone lines up for food. It's fettuccine alfredo or something, and it's quite disgusting after sitting in the dish becoming lukewarm after an hour. To top it all off, the CEO, in front of everyone, says, "I'm not eating that crap, it's full of carbs." He leaves everyone to go out to a, quote, real restaurant. Some of the execs stayed behind to eat with the employees because they knew what this D-bag had just done. He also did something similar during the company Christmas party several months earlier. He traveled from his home state to the state where most of the employees were, showed up for about an hour, then asked one of the young salespeople, "Where are the good clubs to go for getting decent drinks and a decent dinner?" He then took off the rest of the night, leaving us to eat the dinner served at the party. I quit quite a while ago, and he was replaced about a year later. Unfortunately, I've worked under CEOs that were much, much worse. My manufacturing company has an on-site company picnic every year with big giveaways for all employees, but you have to be physically present to win. So, night shift and anybody stuck in the factory working can't win. Just the folks whose job is unimportant enough to stop working for 5 hours and play sack races with upper management. Even when I can go, I refuse to. I make sure to wave when I drive by the picnic area when I'm driving out to a quick McDonald's lunch. It infuriates me. Thomson Reuters axed our Christmas bonuses so that we could have 4 52-inch TV screens that displayed Sky News, company stock results, company predictions, and security systems. Back when smartphones weren't super popular, my manager texted me some crap like, "Wow, any large pizza for just $10? Tell your friends to order now," blah blah, etc., corporate monster crap. Then they instructed me to pass it on to my contracts. I proceeded to use the good old fill the 10 recipient slots with the same contact and sent it right back to her, and then resent about 15 times, causing her phone to be unable to do anything but receive my messages, one at a time, 150 times. She didn't send me bullcrap marketing texts to forward after that. I wonder if that still works on modern phones. Just pasting someone into the contact slot of the SMS feature of our phones that most of us barely use anymore? It was so fun getting your schoolmates into trouble doing this. The cookie incident. I was working as an IT technician for a big corporation. After September 11th, people were stressed out and our manager thinks we need a morale boost. He created some random appreciation tokens, which were nothing but tickets for theater plays that were cancelled a week earlier, discounts for car rentals and hotel stays. Basically just unused corporate coupons that were laying around in his office. I was bitter about not being nominated or any of my team, even if our performance numbers were better than many of the winners. We knew all of the winners were brown-nosed morons. But this time, the universe did justice. 2 days later, a regular user baked a big batch of cookies and sent them to my team. When I thanked her and asked her the reason for her kindness, she just said, "This is for all the times you guys helped me." That was way better than any random coupon. Basically these, among other things, we have bake sales even though we're all techs and there's about 3 people in the entire office who like baking. We have sports events despite the fact that very few people actually play sports. Oh, and the flash mob, so poorly executed, was intended to end up as a YouTube viral video thing. It was laughably bad. The saying, "could not organize a bender in a brewery," comes to mind. And of course, this final one, which I must stress, was not a joke. My team, for having the best performance worldwide, was given, and I crap you not, chocolate medals. I don't know if it's a US thing, but in the UK that's basically an insult. For context, sales guys got laptops and TVs right before we got our medals. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.